welcome everybody to another episode of the Mind Sculptors. I am your host, Callahan, and today we have a great show lined up for you with two co-hosts who haven't been here in a hot minute. But before I go to introduce my lovely guests, you can already see him. Joining me from the great city of Quebec, the Frenchman
I'm not
himself.
from the city of Quebec. I'm from the province of Quebec.
Oh, that's right. The province of
There
Quebec.
is a city of Quebec.
Yeah. The Frenchman himself is Pongo. How are you doing today, Pongo?
I'm well. I'm glad to be back. It's been a while, as you said.
Yeah, it's been a hot minute. We've been doing MLC stuff. You've been busy, and so it's good to have you back on the channel. And also joining us is another Sculpty boy who will be in the MLC. Was talked about a little bit last week, and you didn't have a chance. I saw you in the comment section defending yourself last week. Is
Morgan,
our friend Michael LeVine?
Thank you. Morgan has been ranting about that match nonstop since the match, and he was ranting during the match. He ranted after the match. He ranted that night at our house about the match.
I can't believe
just
this.
keep hearing about
this
it.
Doesn't sound like Morgan.
I believe I have a picture of him standing up with that pirate's cape. Let me see if I can find. I'll see if I can put it on the screen for our viewers. Sorry to our podcast listeners, but I have a picture of him like standing up in that living room area, like lecturing everybody like this about that.
Don't kill Morgan. Don't kill Morgan. It'll just win you the game. I won the game because I killed Morgan. So, you know what? Sorry.
Maybe I should just start making all my attacks at Morgan on Team Turn 3, and then I'll start winning more on Team Turn 3.
Do it for at least for the
possible.
content. Yeah.
At least for the content.
For the content. Exactly. It'll get views.
Well, thank you all for joining us today, and also want to remind you that if you do like this episode or any of our other episodes, please make sure to like this video. If you're on YouTube, leave a review. If you're on Apple Podcasts, any of those things, and leave a comment here on YouTube as well. A great way to support this show, as well as stuff like the MLC, which I've been working on the website, is a little not inexpensive. Is you can join our Patreon, and there's a link down there in the Discord. We've got a lot of different options for what you can do, ways to support us, and some benefits for you. So check out the patreon.com/the Mind Sculptors, or check out the link in the description, like I said. So today we are here to ask the never-ending question: is Streets of New Capenna the set that breaks cEDH? We ask this about once every 2 to 3 months. So, ready to do it again. So our first card. Now, we'll give a preface to this. Our monocolor sections are a lot shorter than they have been in other set reviews, and part of that is because a lot of this set is revolved around like 3 color cards. Mm-hmm. It being like a shard based set. So I believe we don't have any black cards on our list. Like, I don't think there's many, if any, green cards on the list. There's one. So like this will be the shorter part of the review. So starting us off with a bang is Halo Fountain. And when this came out, a lot of people started talking about. There's a combo specifically with what's the combo that where you can turn it into a creature and then it counts itself. I forget.
There's a lot of ways to turn it into
a
creature.
Yeah. So Michael, we were talking about this a little bit. That's what I was gonna do. Is Michael, you talked to some of the people in the Oswald community. You've talked to some of the people who are brewing these sorts of lists. So really, what is this deck? Because at first glance, right, if you were to ask me as just somebody who doesn't play those types of decks, I would look at it and go, I wouldn't play that in anything. But there's a lot of stuff going on with this card.
Yeah, so it's an interesting card. The mono white Discord got pretty excited when it came out because it said the words, you win the game on it, which most white cards don't say that either literally or figuratively. But
usually say you don't lose the game.
Right. Yes, exactly.
And even that's never guaranteed. Just because it's on the card.
But so the cool thing about it involves the rules about paying costs. So you can pay costs in any order. And when Hellfountain is a creature, you can both tap and untap it for its cost, which means that turns into 1 white, make a 1/1, which means it's really easy to pump a lot of white mana and get to next turn cycle, untap 15 tapped creatures, and win the game. So there's a few different ways. I think Oswald has figured out how to do this more efficiently, and there's a few other decks that are thinking about ways in which you can do this more quickly. There's a card we'll talk about at the end today, a multiplayer card that also can do some combos with this. So it's an interesting card. It's when you have a white card that says win the game or says draw a card, people get very excited.
Right.
I don't think Heliod will play it, but I think Oswald is pretty excited about it. I mean, anything they can untap Oswald with is already like getting looked at.
Right.
And the fact that it's a potential win con is kind of a big deal. So I think it's a really interesting card, and I'm sure that there's some other weird combos that will arise. This is the kind of card that's just like so close to already being broken that they'll print something and mess it up. Like they just have to. So
I'm just like looking at this and like thinking about how this interacts in like with Magda in your deck. Like if you're in a red, white, whatever X, and like the combos that Magda already enables, I feel like also kind of enable this in a way.
Yeah, the tricky thing is that there is a colored mana cost in all the abilities, which is definitely a smart move on their part to put the colored mana there.
Yeah, like, so
otherwise it would just be so broken.
Oh man!
But that's why it's not an insane card that's gonna destroy the format. But I have a feeling it will get very much better with time. There's gonna be a lot of ways to make this a really messed up Magic card.
Yeah, I think untapping things as a cost is like overlooked in terms of how broken, like the potential brokenness of that text. And
I know
this
like
says
the
it all
Catilda
over.
deck is already looking at this because it's just like can tap all your humans for mana, so now it's free to untap them. So like it ramps you. It put creatures in play which you can pump with Catilda. It's a draw engine, and then at some point, like you're very likely to have 15 creatures in play in that deck, so you can just win the game. That's
if you have one creature that taps somehow for 2 white mana and one creature that taps to untap an artifact. Yeah, you know what I mean? Like you just win, you draw your deck, and like that doesn't sound that unreasonable.
No, it doesn't exactly.
It sounds viable, like to imagine that board state. Maybe not with cards.
There's definitely something with March of Machines, right? Like turn all your artifacts into creatures and tap your Gilded Lotus,
right?
And like all of a sudden things are going wild. So there's definitely ways to break this. Actually, Gilded Lotus, March Machines, Hellfountain, I think wins the game on the spot because you'll make infinite white mana and 1/1 creatures, which means you can then use the last ability. So like there's gotta be, at the very least, high power decks are just gonna like do real weird stuff, and that's fun. But there's definitely room, at least in Oswald.
Yeah, that does just win the game because you do just make
yeah.
infinite creatures and then just, okay, I win.
Tap them. Yeah. And yeah, if they make the white mana to activate that last ability.
Yeah, exactly. So if it's Gilded Lotus, you're all set. And at the same time, you can draw your whole deck if you wanted to, although you don't really need to. So I think like you'll see this played in decks. I think it's going to be like Oswald, and then the kind of, maybe this is a controversial claim, the weird mid-rangey decks that show up at tournaments because people really enjoy playing them, that play like overly convoluted combos as their win cons.
Now here's one of my questions, because I know the Catilda decks definitely play Artifact Hate. And that is something where I see that being a issue.
Yeah.
And the type, because I guess my thought process is with this card and why I think it's really good in Oswald personally. And I don't know, because the type of decks that are going to want to play this right are going to be green. Well, most green-white decks that I know of are going to be on some array of Oof, Stony Silence, or Null Rod.
Yeah, you run into what I call the Blood Pod problem.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Which is that Blood Pod's major win con was Pod, yet they were a Null Rod Oof deck. And I always felt like that was this awful tension. And I think that people continue to play decks that have that tension. I don't like them. And even in Heliod, I won't play Torpor Orb effects because my tutors are mostly ETBs. But I know a lot of people just don't care. There's a lot of people who will play the stacks pieces and say, it's a win con when I don't draw those pieces. If I need to remove those pieces, I will. People won't remove the pieces because I have this thing on board. People justify why they do it. I don't think it's necessarily a good plan, but people do it.
Yeah. That's probably my biggest criticism of it is I think outside of Oswald, the decks that are interested in this type of effect are probably not going to be able to utilize it very easily because of the type of cards that they play already. That was an issue, and I won't get too deep into this, but that was an issue when I was trying to brew Arden Thrasios, is there was a really deep tension there where it wants you to commit to one game plan or the other, where Arden kind of wants you to play with these artifacts, bring them in, do stuff with them, move things around, and then have some amount of especially in blue Arden decks, of interaction to then protect or support and go along with that. Whereas the green in that deck really wants to have on the field static abilities, and blue really doesn't want to have on the field static abilities. So it's been a very strange deck to brew. And I think this card kind of falls under that, is good. Not sure what the space ends up looking like.
Yep.
Because of the fact of that the decks that will go in that are not mono white are going to struggle to pull out the full value of it.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah. What were you gonna say?
Oh, I just said that's fair.
Oh, okay. Next card on our list is Patch Up. It is 2 colorless and a white sorcery that says return up to 3 target creature cards with total mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. So we talked about this a little bit beforehand. It's definitely, obviously, Michael, it's really good for white. But Pongo, outside of the white decks that are obviously going to be very interested in this, what is your assessment of this card overall?
Well, so if I'm not mistaken, this is very similar to a black card that already exists. Mm-hmm. There's a black card like this. I think it says, up to 2 creatures with CMC 3? Yeah. Mm-hmm. So that card, I basically didn't even know it existed until this card got printed and people started making the comparison. And I feel like shifting the color obviously changes the conversation a little bit. So I'm not going to absolutely write this card off, but I don't think that it changes it enough such that, higher color decks that could have played that other card would now consider this card. The extra creature is meaningful because conceivably if you're playing this, there's going to be a lot of situations where you want to get 3 1-drops back, and that's going to be, the conceit behind actually running it. But I'm still not sure about its home in any decks right now. Maybe Michael would know better.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that a lot of white and white-red decks will probably try to play it. I mean, it's one of these effects that I'm happy they're printing more of. They started off really strong with Sevin's Reclamation, And then they were like, what if we go a little softer than this? But they're really going hard on, like, can you get card advantage through these reanimation effects in white?
Right.
And, you know, how many things can you reasonably reanimate at a low cost? And I think there's a lot of these 2-color creature-based decks that, you know, can really use a way to put basically their whole field back on the board after, like, a Toxic Deluge or something. And then you imagine, like, is there going to be some kind of interesting pile you can make? I don't know how you'll get them in the graveyard, but you can imagine, like, a survival of the fittest pile where you put them all in the graveyard and then you get them all back at once. So I like this space. I don't know if this card is going to be powerful enough to really get played other than in the white decks and maybe the white-red decks, but it's like, this is the optimal space. We already know that one white card got printed like this that is pretty much broken. Right? Reclamation just like broke open intuition piles. So I think they were trying to play it safe, but this is the, you know, right on the border of maybe too safe.
Creatures only is big difference.
It's a big difference. Big difference. Yeah, can't get back LED is a big difference.
Well, speaking of creatures that may have a big difference, is our first blue card on the list, which is Errant Street Artist. It only costs 1 singular blue, is a legendary human rogue with flash, defender, and haste. It's a 0/3, and it has the activated ability where you pay a colorless and a blue and tap it and copy target spell you control that wasn't cast. You may choose new targets for the copy. So this is our obligatory Kirk and Sakashima deck or card, right, Michael? Like, this is this is going into Kirk and Sakashima. Yeah,
I think Ken's into it. It's like, it's a weird card. Like, I'm trying. Like, I think they gave it Defender because they hate this idea of hasty 1-drops that could trigger like attack trigger things.
Yeah,
it's very bizarre. Flash
I find that part very bizarre too.
Yeah,
it's a rogue with Defender, and it's a 0/3, and it has
haste. Like it's such a confusing card, but you know someone's gonna want to abuse it to copy things. Copying spells is really good. This is what we've learned over the last like year and a half.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it'll get seen play in the Kark Sakashima deck. I don't know what the Kark Thrasios deck actually does, but maybe it'll see play there. Heard that deck does things, but other than that, I don't know where it'll go. But it's like I feel like it does combos with Volo, right? Isn't there some combo it does?
If I'm not mistaken, with Great Oak Guardian. Yeah. So the thing is, obviously, you have to copy a copied spell, right? What's interesting is that it says spell, so obviously that means you can hit things that would turn into permanents and then get a token. Something with Great Oak Guardian, you're copying the clone, the copied spell that Volo would give you, and then Great Oak Guardian enters play, untaps, and you can then, do that same thing over again, where you're gonna go ahead and copy the copy that you made, or the original copy after you made a copy. Sometimes things get weird with the stack when you're copying copies and whatnot. But as long as you can make 2 mana or 3 mana, you can kind of just make infinite Great Oak Guardians. Yeah,
so it's one of those cards, again, that it's like, it can probably become broken somehow very easily.
Mm-hmm.
And it already has a shell to fit into. So, when you see the Kark deck with 1 and 2 blue open, and they cast they have a counterspell on the stack, and you're hoping they get a bunch of tails, just know, who the hell knows? You're screwed.
Yeah, the issue with this in Kark Thrasios specifically, at least like my build of that deck, is that with that deck, if you get a copy of a spell, you essentially win, unless they can counter, one of the 2 copies, because you're copying a creature to battlefield tutor, and then you're assembling infinite mana, or like right on the spot typically. So copying the copy is not necessarily incredibly relevant. What's more important is things that, copy the original spell, or else, give you a bit more security on that coin flip, by either giving you an extra coin flip or whatever. So like, I don't know about it there, but maybe in some builds of that deck.
Here's my question with this card that I feel like for it to be worth your time in Kark Sakashima, you have to have you have to have like a lot of mana open. Because you have to cast the spell and then win your flip and then be able to cast this and activate it. And so we're already talking like at minimum 4 mana, and you need some amount of things to go your way. Yeah. And so I feel like, Ken, forgive me, but it feels very much like a win more card to me, right? Because the situations where, because like it doesn't fix the lack of a deterministic win for that deck at all. I think that all it does is just basically continue to, it gives you one more copy of something, which could be relevant, but you also have to have the mana open for it.
Yeah.
And then you're now opening yourself up for the original spell to get countered.
Well, I mean, that's like, always kind of how you're supposed to play against that deck, right? Right. I mean, the way that deck works is that it optimally, in most situations, wants to copy the spell and return it to its hand. It varies depending on what the spell is, but like, you know, sort of as a baseline, that means that you are getting your spell and you're also drawing a card. Right. So like here, you can get your copy, get another copy, and then like in some situations also return it to your hand. So that can be powerful. I just, you know, I wonder if it's better than, you know, the other options that the deck currently has, because that deck has got a lot of cards.
That's kind of my thought is I don't know where it's like better than any of the other cards that the deck is already playing. And I think the reason people are looking at this and like going, oh, this is good, is because it says copy target spell you control that wasn't cast, and we immediately think Kark, but I don't know that it's actually that good, if that makes sense.
Is it solving problems that the deck has? I don't think so.
Yeah, and that's kind of my... I think that deck desperately needs to figure out a way to present a deterministic win to be able to be like to go into these like, all right, get ready, Ian, you're gonna cringe, to go into these cEDH environments and like put up reasonable results.
I just don't see that happening. I think that the strength of the deck is the engine and all the cards you're playing that eventually have to become deterministic, right?
Yeah.
So like playing cards to have a deterministic win makes the deck less powerful.
It never, ever, at any point is deterministic.
No.
It gets extremely likely, but that is not the same as is deterministic. And that is something that I think is very important to...
Hold on. It does at some point become deterministic. If you're just doing the Kark Sakashima thing, playing rituals and like, you know, playing cards over and over again, then sure, you know, we can waffle on, you know, whether or not that eventually like gets deterministic or like converges or whatever. But like eventually at some point you're going to draw into your deck, put like Breach on the stack and start like brain freezing people to death, right? Or you're going to start
but that's like that's kind of my point, is that it's like the actual only deterministic thing in the deck is the Breach. And so my point is that in order for that deck to really like the issue it needs to solve is how do we win these Kark triggers with a card that can deterministically in some way win the game, where we don't have to get Underworld Breach and we can lean into what our deck does even more, if that makes sense. And I think that is like ultimately the problem.
And I don't think that's going to exist.
And I don't think it will exist, but I think that is a barrier to that deck being like obviously it's a really good deck, but I think like there are going to be rulings where like I know Ken wanted to get like shortcut rulings that are similar to like Gitrog's rulings for shortcutting Kruk triggers. And the issue is you literally cannot shortcut Kruk triggers. And so that's like sort of the issue, is until Wizards print something that fixes that issue, it's going to continue to be like a total nightmare for every TO and judge that organizes cEDH events. And
this card doesn't fix it.
No, this card doesn't fix that issue. Nope. Yeah, exactly. Next card on our list does fix a lot of things for a lot of decks, including Lavinia. And it is a deck a card that I feel like it's not Crom, it's Crom at home. It's Ledger Shredder. It is a 1/3 Bird Advisor that costs a colorless and a blue. That has flying, and whenever a player casts their second spell each turn, Ledger Shredder, man, that's kind of hard to say, connives. So you draw a card, then discard a card. That is one of the new set mechanics. If you discarded a non-land card, put a +1/+1 card on this creature. So Michael, I know, or excuse me, Pongo, I know I'm kind of like joking about this being Crom at home because like there's a very direct comparison, right, with the trigger to Crom. But this is actually a very different card that has a lot of power that I don't think a lot of people are paying attention to.
Just in time for American tax season, we've got the Bird Advisor telling us that what you should do is destroy the evidence. So yeah, it's a great card. I think that like you do probably want to be playing this alongside Tymna in most situations, or else you're playing it in a deck that is just really, really hungry for, you know, whatever card advantage it can get, and it's kind of low card quality.
Lavinia.
Yeah, well, exactly.
But like Tymna Malcolm, this is an insane card.
Yeah,
right?
this is
Tymna Malcolm for sure. Yeah. It's very powerful alongside Tymna. You know, would you play this in just like your classic, like, I don't know, I'll use Najil as an example. I'm not convinced that like the looting effect is necessarily what Najila, for example, would want. But, you know, you put this in like Thrasios Tymna, you know, now it's like drawing cards, like hard drawing cards because of Tymna, and it's also getting the sort of slow, gradual value. You know, if you're playing Thrasios Tymna, like Razakat's like a Reanimator style deck, then you're actually getting value off of the discard part, which is huge. Yeah. You know, Tymna Crom.
The fact that it grows is actually a huge deal.
The fact that it grows
this thing could
is
actually
pretty good.
get fairly big, fairly fast. And now you have, you know, the thing that could be close to the size of a Seer Ascendant. And that is important in these
and is also drawing you cards.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, like these weird stalls before someone ad nauseas, if you can just start taking their life, you know, that's a big deal. So I think that the counter makes this card just, it pushes it to be like, yes, this is a very good card.
Connive is a bananas mechanic, in my opinion. Like, it's a stupid mechanic. It is so powerful. The fact
it's like looting. It's looting plus. It's mega looting, right?
Yeah,
it's like
exactly.
It's like the mega looting. You know, you've heard of Morph and you've heard of Megamorph, but
when I first saw Connive, I was just like, oh, you draw a card and you do it X times or whatever because you know, that's what they're calling it, the set. And then I saw the second part attached to the reminder text, and I was like, wait, this is stupid. Why is this a thing?
I think it's because they don't like the idea that it could do nothing. Like, if you're empty-handed, you just draw and discard.
Yeah.
So they want to attack on something so you'll always get some value, which was probably unnecessary. Like, they did this with Explore, too, right? Like, they like the idea of creatures that have these triggers, like, always get some value out of it. And this one might be a little too much.
I don't know that Connive is too much. I think, like, I think this card, especially in, like, outside of EDH, is, like, fine. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, Crom in this get, like, considerably worse when you're in a 1v1 format. This, I think, I think like adding that extra value on, like I think like Explore needed to be the way it was for it to be worth your time.
Yeah.
But I could talk about Ixalan all day. I have lots of opinion. Maybe we'll do like that was one of the sets when I was playing a lot of standard and stuff during Ixalan. So maybe we'll do a retrospective of Ixalan sometime and all of that stuff. But next card on our list is, I hate the way they named this card because I don't know. It's going to sound so weird whenever you cast this card, is an offer you can't refuse. It is 1 singular blue, counter target non-creature spell. Its controller creates 2 treasure tokens. Now, Michael, there's been a lot of discussion around this card. I've seen some people say it's better than Swan Song, which I don't know that I agree with for what it's worth. But I've also seen people like Ian who think it's trash and bad, you shouldn't play it. Where do you fall on it? What do you think about this card, Michael?
I think it's about as good as Swan Song. I think the hit all non-creatures is a pretty big deal. And I think 2 treasures is a lot, but it's not a lot when it counters the Consultation or the Tainted Pact. It's not a lot when it counters the Reanimation spell or the Breach. So it's a pretty powerful effect at a cheap cost, and the thing that you have to pay, giving someone some mana, like, it's not the biggest deal when you stop them with it. It's going to feel really bad to use it early on, right? And that's the weird tension. It's costed cheaply so you can cast it early on without having to keep a lot of mana up, but if you do it, they are now ramped on their next turn.
But that makes it even more flavorful, though, right? It's an offer you can't refuse for both people involved in the offer.
Yeah,
like
exactly. Exactly. And they're obviously, again, Shakashima is going to do stupid stuff with this card where they're countering their own spells. And actually, I play Belcher in Modern. We're going to play it too, and we're also going to counter some of our own spells. There's whole piles in Belcher where you win things.
I think it's hilarious that in Commander you play these like stacksy, grindy, still combo decks, but they're really grindy combo decks. And then in Modern, you're like a whole different person. And it's like, well, surely, like, Michael plays, like, Death and Taxes or something, right? No, you play fucking Belcher. Like
Belcher and 8-Whack, yeah. But yeah, like, there's really cool stuff you can do with it in Belcher. So I think it's a really interesting card. It's a cool design. Maybe it actually could have been 1 treasure, to be honest. But I think they wanted it to be mana positive. They wanted them to get more mana back than you were paying. And I think that makes sense. Treasures, I just think they underestimate how powerful treasures are.
Yeah.
It's giving someone 2 Lotus Petals.
Yeah.
A card that had to be restricted in Vintage.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to restrict it because, when you construct your deck around it, it's much more powerful, right? As opposed to when you happen to get 2 because of your opponent's counter
But what cEDH deck isn't constructed around fast mana?
For sure. 100%.
Every deck can use
I don't think I would ever play this in Vintage.
Excuse you, Mike, Charles's Heliod deck that famously top forward without a soul ring.
No. But this one makes colored mana, so he can use it much more profitably.
Okay. So Pongo, I look at this card and in my opinion, I look at this and I go, I think this is, if I was going to slot it into a deck, I put it in over like a Spell Pierce, or I put it in
or like
over
a Dispel
a Negate.
Or a Negate. Yeah.
It fits into just adding to the suite of 1 mana interaction that you have. I mean, what is your thoughts on this? Because I know this card has been pretty polarizing. I've seen some people think it's the greatest thing since sliced bread, and then I've seen other people who think that it's milk toast.
Yeah, I'm somewhere in between. I don't think it's as good as Swan Song, actually. And I think it's not as good as Swan Song for the reason, Michael, that you mentioned, which is that what does this gain over Swan Song? Mainly the ability to hit artifacts, right? And so what artifact
and
card...
Planeswalkers.
Which is
We're going to mention one here soon that is relevant.
Which is relevant, but not, like, by my estimation, not so relevant.
It's not so relevant.
Yeah.
It can,
if you look at the format as a whole. It can
target a Narset.
Right.
So
if you look at the format as a whole, not incredibly relevant. But the main upside of this over Swansong is that it can counter artifacts. And I think that, if you look at artifact win conditions and sort of like what they are, and if you look at artifacts as they are in the format, the majority of them are stacks pieces, like, the things that you would want to counter early that are artifacts.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that this is at its worst when it's countering stacks pieces compared to a Swansong. So the upside of this over Swansong, I would say, amplifies its weakest use case in many situations. Where, for example, if I wanted to counter something like a Torpor Orb, giving the stacks deck or the deck playing Torpor Orb or whatever 2 treasures after that lets them, theoretically maybe play 2 stacks pieces on their following turn, could be really, really quite rough.
That being said, they have the least card advantage, and they're usually, like, if we're talking about a deck that plays Null Rod, they're not really set up to use the treasures as profitably.
Sure. If they are playing Null Rod and Null Rod is in play, then this becomes really stupid. And
baby, if you're playing the Null Rod deck.
Yeah. Well, exactly. So there are situations where this is
so
better.
Good.
But I do think that the 2/2 in general is negligible enough in a lot of situations as an upside.
People say that until it draws cards off Tymna.
Yeah.
And then it becomes very not negligible, right? Like, how many times have people drawn off swans? Like, it's a thing. So
yeah. Well, and I think that is where I think it's like, I think you're mentioning of kind of where I land on it. I do think it's worse than Swansong because I do think the relative value, generally speaking, within cEDH of a 2/2 Swan
is lower than 2 treasures.
Specifically within the way that you contextualized, I thought was really good. Of that is lower than 2 Lotus Petals,
mm-hmm.
And I think that's where I look at that and I go, I think this is definitely worse but I don't think it's like miles worse, right?
Yeah,
like I think it's like the trade-off of, okay, so you're ramping them a little bit, but I can hit a wider range of targets, and this is a little bit better than Spell Pierce because they can't just like, oh yeah, I pay the 2 and move on, right? And so there is like a level of this where it is better than, I would say, most 1 mana counterspell options, but I don't know that I would put this over Swansong.
Yeah, I mean, there's
you know what else it can do? Brain Freeze, Breach. You can counter the other copies of your Brain Freeze,
right?
So that you can make it super mana efficient and pay for the next Brain Freeze. So you can actually go off without an LED.
But here's...
Well, you're netting 1 mana, right?
I think you're... Realistically, that feels super win more to me, because like I feel like if you're at that point, you're already in a winning position. If you're in a position where you're countering your own Brain Freeze so because that you can replay it
feels
means
like you have an extra blue
there.
Mana, so all you need is an extra colorless mana for the next Brain Freeze, right?
And the likelihood of you Brain Freezing yourself into something that solves that problem for you is like absurdly high.
It's high, but usually, like, you would never do it if you didn't have the LED, the grinding, whatever the artifact is, grinding station.
Yeah.
Like, now you can just go, if you have one, say you have the Breach, so that your next spell makes 2, you can counter both of them from your graveyard with the offer. So that's paying 4 mana, making 4 treasures, and now your storm is 5. So now you're, like, definitely going off. And you can do it again. Like, you don't have to worry about not hitting because you deterministically will hit.
It can help with the low resource breaches early on.
Yeah.
But,
I think as long as you have, like, 4... Like, if you have 3 blue, 1 colors, I think it's almost determined. You'll be able to do it deterministically to win, and that's kind of a big deal.
Or if you have... 3 blue...
and
I guess you do... You pretty much need to... Or 2 blue, 1 colorless, right? Because you're casting Brain Freeze, getting a copy, countering one of the copies. You're going to have fewer cards in your graveyard. but you're going to have 2 treasures, so you can recast Brain Freeze, go again, and hopefully at that point you're hitting, you know, something that lets you go mana positive. I don't know, that feels like a bit niche. Ultimately, you know, with this card, there are going to be situations, I think, later on, like later game, when, like, if you're playing against, like, you know, Timna Crom, for example, you know, they have a grip full of cards. You know, you're trying to counter, like, a payoff, and you give them 2 treasures, and they can kind of just play another payoff after that. So it's going to feel bad in those situations, I think. It's going to feel bad in the situations where you have to counter something early, and you can't immediately convert into a win, and you accelerate an opponent in that situation. It's going to feel a little bad in certain offensive applications, where, you know, you're trying to defend your win condition with it, and theoretically you counter their counterspell, they get 2 mana, and you've just unlocked them to cast more counterspells. So those are going to be situations where it feels bad. It's going to feel, I think, pretty good when you're countering other people's big payoffs. And they haven't been sculpting so early on. It's 1 mana interaction. And then obviously there's the use cases for combo potential, which I think, you know, Ian, I was downplaying them, but I actually think that, you know, to Michael's point, and also, you know, if you're looking at the context of certain decks that are maybe like less all in on Nas, such that they're not playing quite the same ritual density, getting to that 1 blue, that 1 colored mana can be a lot easier. But in many situations, those decks do need to get to like a 2nd colored mana. So that can be useful in those situations. I have goldfished that already in certain decks as being a relevant line. Well, not just that deck, also Kenrith, because I play 5 color decks. But but no, you know, it certainly can come up.
One of the places that I do think it's really good, and I think I'd like to see more decks constructed in this way, actually. And I know this is probably going to sound really like, you know, almost like it's going to feel a little bit like nepotism, but hang with me. I know I talk a lot about Ardent Crom on this channel, and I'm probably going to talk about it even more in a moment, but like, the type of control deck it is it uses Rule of Law, and I've talked about this before, is it uses Rule of Law very similarly to how control decks use 3 fairy in 1v1 formats, is it uses Rule of Law to back up its counterspells and basically ensure they get through. And I think this, in those style decks, which I think definitely need to be more prevalent, that this deck card gets so much better within that context, where you're under a Rule of Law, you counter something, they can't cast another spell anyway. Sure, you've given them 2 mana, but you're also playing a high interaction deck, so you're very likely to be able to deal with it. And the fact that you've now given a high interaction deck a pretty hard counterspell at 1 mana means that you're going to have more resources that you have available to dedicate to other things that are going to be coming out. And so, like, those sorts of control decks, I think this is very strong in. But that's kind of my 2 cents on it. Is I think that this is really good in Rule of Law control decks, where Rule of Law can back it up and sort of make it give you some sort of protection in a way of the offer of what you're giving them is a little bit more one-sided to you in that regard, if that makes sense. So in the flavor text of this card, it says Elspeth wanted answers. Xander needed a spy, and they crossed paths. Their paths were destined to cross, so they crossed. And I don't know if this is part of the lore, but I think she had to go into witness protection, which, believe it or not, is our next card here. This is what I do.
This is a very well costed version of this effect.
Yeah, I'm actually really excited about this card. It's the first of this effect that I've been like, this is genuinely really good. Is Witness Protection. It costs 1 blue. It is an enchantment aura. You enchant a creature, and enchanted creature loses all abilities and is a green and white citizen creature with base power and toughness 1/1, named Legitimate Business Person. The thing that comes to mind, I don't know why, when it says Legitimate Business Person, is the thing from South Park where it was like what is it? The principal, PC principal. It made me think of that and like Strong Woman for some reason. Because it's
I was
legitimate business person.
BoJack Horseman,
right?
And the 3 kids in a trench coat.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. He goes to his job at the business factory.
So one of the things that I do like about this card, I'm going to talk about this a little bit at the beginning, just because I have a lot of thoughts about this card, is I really like it in Arden decks. Everybody's shocked I brought up Arden. But the reason being is especially because I believe those decks should be all playing Sigarda's Aid, so that, because you probably want to be on some form of rule of law, Sigarda's Aid gives you more game actions that you're able to take. And this being an aura is, especially in a deck that probably is going to have Sigarda's Aid in it and is probably going to have it out most of the games that it plays, because I've definitely like immediately been like, okay, I need Sigarda's Aid. This becomes instant speed like answers to big problems. And even outside of that, in a low color blue deck, I don't know, say like a Lavinia, right? You're able to deal with the Kroms, you're able to deal with the Nixilis and the Kenriths from just running over you, because of the fact that you are able to, for a pretty, like 2 mana is reasonably costed. This is aggressively costed. And I think that is what makes it feel like, for me, where I go, okay, this is it's 1 mana. I feel comfortable committing 1 mana to this card. And I think that kind of pushes it over the edge. Pongo, I know you have thoughts about this card, because I can look in your eyes and see into your soul, just the you be like making fun of Lavinia and making fun of Arden. What are your thoughts of Witness Protection?
That was some serious projection right there.
Listen, I play with you guys every Sunday, so I hear
it all.
Lavinia, the Arden,
Yeah. No, I mean, I agree with everything that's been said so far. I think that this is a really cool card, very powerful. I like that it's blue. You can pitch it to Force of Will, helps your blue card counts if you wanted an extra, sort of removal slot. For 1 less mana over something like Kenrith's Transformation, you're not getting a card drop, but 1
or
mana.
Darksteel Mutation.
Yeah, well, I mean, Darksteel Mutation is, I would say, kind of the worst option of the bunch, but obviously if you're in low colors, you can play it. It being that it doesn't draw a card. Although, that being said, a 3/3 is actually a very, very relevant body, and a 0/1 indestructible, not incredibly relevant.
It's hard to chump block away. So
exactly.
Commander. Yeah.
That being said, I value efficiency, and I value the replacement card highly. So I think that this is a perfectly fine card. If you were looking for more single target removal, you could play this. I'm personally not especially interested in more single target removal, not after we got the March of Swirling Mist and stuff like that. But if you're playing like a slower deck, then probably you would want the more permanent answer. So, I just, these days I'm not playing a ton of those decks. And so, this doesn't really fit into
I'm over here
the wheelhouse
with
of decks
three
that I like
sleeved
to play.
up decks are all just like, man, can't wait.
I think it's a good card in the right place, but currently I'm just not playing decks where I'm clamoring to include it. But I could see myself playing it in other decks.
What do you think, Michael? Any thoughts on witness protection here on legitimate business person?
I mean, I love the loses ability effects, and I like the targeted ones. So I think it's a really cool card. I would like, auras just feel so bad sometimes because it's so easy for the effect just go away
to fall off.
Why not just remove the creature? The times where you don't want to just remove the creature, like you don't want to Pongify it, is when it's a commander. And the one problem with these kinds of cards is that you now can't attack them with anything that's non-flying, because they're just going to block and recast their commander.
Or
so there is
you put a Sword of Hearthstone Home on it, and it's pro that card now.
Isn't it Hearthstone? Oh yeah, it's white green. That's true.
You're pro white green.
Yeah. So like I understand why your Ardent decks are super excited, but I'm always disappointed. Like what we said about Darksteel Mutation. Darksteel Mutation costs a card, and like they can later Nature's Claim it away and
Boseiju it. That's like a big strike against a lot of these aura effects.
The indestructible, making it indestructible though is or like the one that makes it a coward and it can't block. Like those effects are actually good because they can't just easily pitch away the creature. This one doesn't have that protection.
Right.
It's just super efficient, and I do like it. But I have a feeling, if I was playing blue decks that weren't Ardent decks, I'd probably be doing like rapid hybridization, Pongify first. Like when I was trying to build Orvar for MLC, I don't think this would have made the cut. But
it's interesting.
It's a good card.
Like,
it's the effect I want to see at 1 mana.
It's interesting because with Ardent, the ability to move it around makes it much better. Interesting. Yeah. And that's one of the things. But like I've said this before, where even in Ardent, I don't play stuff like Darksteel Mutation, because of exactly what you said. Is auras tend to fall off, because people want to get them off, so they'll do something with their commander that puts it in your graveyard. And this being 1 mana, I'm okay with losing a 1 mana spell that turns something off, in the moment, versus 2 mana to turn that off. And it sounds crazy to say that, but when you're playing a hard control deck like that, literally every single mana matters. Yeah. So like you literally sit there and you're just like, okay, can I afford to interact here? Or do I used
to play to Tame It spell in Heliod. That's a 1 white aura that you lose the activated abilities, and then you have 1 colorless 1 white to move it around. And I liked it because it shut off a mana dork at the beginning of the game. Later on, I moved it on to Gila or Sisay or whatever bullshit creature is now out. And I think that being able to move it around is a huge deal because you don't lose out from playing it early, because you can put it on the bigger threat later. I think that's like something Ardent can take advantage of with this one, where you can play it as a Stone Rain on a mana dork if you need to,
right?
And then move it later.
So now moving over into the red cards, we've got the goodest boy. Pretty sure this is going into Winota. Is Goldhound. It is.
I wish I could play it at MLC.
It's in the college right now. It needs 1 year in college to have MLC eligibility. It's got to have 1 year in college.
It's like Air Bud, the card, right?
Yeah, really. It costs 1 red. It's a 1/1 with First Strike and Menace, which is bananas.
Yeah, we're just giving 1-drops 2 keywords
First Strike
now.
and Menace. I had to process that just now.
And you can sacrifice it for a treasure. It's kind of it's a lot.
I'm actually surprised they didn't put Vigilance on this card. Like
in red,
genuinely
that doesn't make much sense.
Well, I'm surprised they didn't make it like red-white. for
2 mana?
because Naya's
either?
out. Like Naya's
Hybrid.
one of the, you know what I mean? Like a red-white split card, because that, that's within the Naya stuff that they're doing.
But white can't just like have a ritual, right? Like that doesn't make sense in white. So
no.
Well, it wouldn't be right. It would be Boros, so it'd be fine.
No, if it was a hybrid card, it would have to be a white card.
Yep.
But anyway,
this card is bananas. It's bananas.
So this card definitely going into Winota. We talked about this a little bit, Michael, but you also expect
I think Mad Farm
to play.
They play Blood Pet. They play Overeager Apprentice. Like, they like the idea of putting cards on the board and storing them for mana and being able to sacrifice them for other things. Like, that is this card. And it gets through for Tymna. Like,
it is summoning sick, though, so you can't sack
it is summoning
the turn
sick.
It comes down.
So I was looking beforehand, like, how many times will that be relevant? What lines? There are times where you want to fill your graveyard for, like, a breach, and you have to do it that turn, where this is definitely worse. But I think the ability to put this down turn 1 and like Tymna turn 2 draw a card and then draw a bunch of cards until the turn you go off where now it's a mana is actually like a really big advantage.
It's definitely like
Menace is crazy.
Like it's definitely a generally speaking outside of those like specific breach situations. It is generally speaking a higher EV card than like a Blood Pet or something like that, right? Because Blood Pet, most of the time you get that, you draw that card and you're like, oh fuck, right? You know what I mean? Like you're never happy to see that card.
You draw this one and next turn you're hitting with Tymna.
Yeah.
And, Jessica, you could do the triple on it. It has to be blocked by 2 things.
And it has first strike.
It has first strike.
We're not blocking the dog at that point.
You're not blocking the dog, exactly. So, like, it's actually a really interesting card because it's going to be a draw engine in these Tymna decks, and I think that that's super cool. At Winota, I mean, it's going to be Winota triggers all day. It's going to be
just realized that what this card is going to do, and maybe I am putting this out into the world, and so I hope people do say this, is whenever it, like, the Jessica does that and the life totals are at a point where this card is, like, a super problem, is, honey, it's time to block the dog. Get it? It sounds like walk the dog.
Yeah.
Come on, Paul.
Laugh
at my jokes, goddammit.
One issue with it being a 1/1 and having Menace is that, like, it is easy to double block it if you have 2 creatures.
It is easy to double block,
right?
Which
like,
I think specifically Tymna making that first strike very relevant in the Menace situation is, like, pretty good because it will trade up then when you Jessica it.
If you Jessica
in a Tymna in a Tymna Jessica deck, like people want to block it because they don't want to give you the card, but now they're gonna definitely be trading.
Right.
And
my question is
really
like, how many? This is because I think about this regularly, right? Like I'm playing like Tymna Thrasios for instance. I'm playing like Rector Fit. Is how many times am I willing to trade my 1/1 dork or 2 1/1 dorks for your singular sacrifice add 1 mana creature, right?
Well, you'd be sacrificing it for that and to deny a card.
Yeah, I mean, apparently people are willing to sacrifice mana dorks for like Najeela tokens, right? So like,
but
I don't know.
Like that just feels like a 2-for-1 that's not in your favor.
Well, it's not a 2-for-1.
I guess it's a 1-for-1.
It'll be a 1-for-1 with Jessica. It can become now a 2-for.
It just doesn't feel like it's a trade that's in your favor.
I agree, and I mean I don't like to block creatures with dorks.
Yeah,
like sacking a land to block a creature feels really really bad, and that's what blocking with a dork really is. So, and this is why we were talking about this earlier, playing Planeswalkers, and I'll give credit to Rebel because Rebel and I had a long conversation about this as I tuned my Wilder Pile deck. We were talking about Planeswalkers in cEDH, and the problem is that the minute you play it, everyone wants to attack it, even if you're not really that far ahead.
That's not true. I played Narset Transcendent, and people are like, "Oh, that card's fine," and then you just sit there with it for 3 turns, and then suddenly you ult it, and people are like, "Wait, what?"
And then you still lose the game.
Objectively good
I
Planeswalkers.
didn't lose that game. Shut up.
People like to attack them, and I in a lot of decks feel very torn about the blocking, because you can play a hate bear deck with a lot of creatures and be like, I don't want to trade this hate bear to save my Karn, the Great Creator.
Right.
But like, I am kind of being forced to. And because everyone feels compelled to attack the Planeswalker, you're going to have to make that decision very many times, which leads you to have a lot of points where you can make a suboptimal decision that loses you the game. And like, you don't need to draw that attention to yourself just to get one extra activation. That's all you're getting, right? You're only going to get one extra activation.
Here's where I'm going to link to Rebel's like whole 20-minute dissertation she wrote about
Planeswalkers.
Planeswalkers for her video. If you haven't checked out that video, go check it out, because she literally details all of this in that video. The next card up on our list is the card that is one of the Vi's of the set. And I'm talking about my favorite character from Arcane, Vi, of course. And that's Jaxis the Troublemaker. Jaxis is 3 mana and a red, is a human warrior, and it's a 2/3, has an activated ability that costs a red, you tap it and discard a card, create a token that's a copy of another target creature you control, it gains haste, and when this creature dies, draw a card, sacrifice it at the beginning of the next end step. You can only activate it as a sorcery. So, but it also has Blitz. By the way.
Blitz kind of big.
So you can... Yeah, and it is important to note that Blitz is different than what's the thing Ragavan has?
Dash.
It is different because instead of
going to hand,
you sacrifice it and draw a card.
I think they realize that good cards with dash are really good, and they are like, let's make this a one-time dash thing, but let's not punish you too much, so you get a card.
Yeah.
Well, and it plays with one of the themes, like the limited themes of sacrificing stuff, right?
Yeah.
So what do you think? Obviously, you're going to have opinions about this, Pongo. Every time I know there were so many new warriors printed in this set. This set was Phoenix either pinging you in our Discord about a new warrior or pinging me in the Discord about either a new aura, equipment, or vehicle. Like, what is your thoughts on Jaxis here?
So many warriors, and yet like almost none of them are quite there for Nixilis.
There's one that makes it.
Well, we'll get to that one. Yeah. This is, as for at least right now, not really a Nixilis card. Mainly because we don't have that many things that we're like particularly excited to clone. And beyond that, it's 4 mana, so like I'm not like super excited just to play this for 4 mana and kind of wait a turn and then do the thing. There is a world where theoretically you can blitz this, you can like attack with it and then draw a card, and then it's like 2 mana. I made a warrior token and I drew a card, which is like still not good. I
wondered where you were going with that. Yeah, that sounds bad.
In that deck, the ideal situation would be like copying a Dockside Extortionist. But anyway, this is not really.
I think that's how it's going to get used, right? A lot of decks that would play this card are playing it because they're like, I'm going to copy a Dockside.
Well, I think that there's better things you can do with this card because like there is combo potential with the card, right?
There is, but like they purposely limit it by giving a colored cost to the activation, and in this case, maybe you have to discard a card. That really makes things a lot more difficult.
There's the other entire layer on this, which is you can only activate this at sorcery speed. So like this isn't like Kiki Jiki, right? Where like this is has more like openings for interaction than other creature combo decks do. Like this is definitely a way more fragile sort of like twin style effect.
Right. Yeah, I mean you can't even do like stupid stuff with it, like attack and like, untap it and then activate it during combat, activate Nixilis to untap it, activate it again. With Dockside Extortionist and then take combats equal to the number of cards in hand. just because of that sorcery speed rider. So I mean, yeah, you're probably trying to do combo stuff with this. You're probably trying to blitz this out so it has haste, so that for 3 mana you're copying something, and it's going to require you to have other things on the board. You know, like Phyrexian Altar to, you know, sacrifice the copies so that you can at least get over that red mana hurdle. And then, you know, how are we putting cards in hand? Well, I suppose we'll figure that part out. Or else we're copying something that once we have a copy of that. Things. Yeah, once we have a copy of that, we're fine. But
to its credit,
it's a good Godo card.
Is if you're doing the Phyrexian Altar sort of thing, when those creatures that you copy with it die, so if you sack them to Phyrexian Altar, you do draw a card. So it does refill your hand. So it can have some potential if you have a creature out that I don't know what in mono red would do that.
Well, I mean, like Kiki Jiki type combos, right? So,
I guess there's like Zealous Conscripts. I guess would be the card.
Untap it. Yeah.
It'll untap it, and then you can do it again.
So you can draw your whole deck, and
so you can draw your deck. So there is a combo there. It's just it's in number 1. It's in mono red. Number 2, it can only work at sorcery speed.
Yeah.
And I think those are 2. Yes, Magda did just win, like Marchesa, and Ian did pick it in the second round of the MLC draft. But let's put some context here, right?
This is not Magda.
This is not Magda. Like, Magda can win at instant speed through a rule of law.
Right.
That, like, it's, like, people, there's a lot to be said about, like, Covetous even said, like, on record, that, like, I got a lot of, like, wins out of people not knowing how the deck works. But even when people know how the deck works, I think Sick Robot said this when we were talking about it, is it just takes one person to, like, have a slight lapse of judgment. And then the deck is just, like, because the deck, all it does is just put itself in a position to win.
Right.
This can't do that. And so... it being a sorcery activation, if this was an instant speed activation, I honestly think this would be fine.
It would be better. I do feel like a lot of the combos you would be still like led toward doing even at instant speed would either require an additional piece in play or still have some kind of sorcery speed requirement, right? Of like going to combat or whatever. So it would probably still be an issue. I mentioned before, like Godo could theoretically play this card because, you know, it does reduce the combo requirements from 11 mana to 9 mana, where you play Godo and then you can blitz this, and for 1 extra mana you can make a copy of Godo. So what you would do is you would first get not the helm but the hammer, and then the hammer lets you equip the helm. So that, you know, theoretically,
it is
that
a layer of
play
protection for Godo,
you know, and you know, if you can get to 4 mana, then you can play this, and then it's actually only 7 mana for the Godo combo. So you can kind of curve in a way if you're kind of doing like this turn 2, Godo turn 3, like one of those types of curves. So yeah, I mean, from that perspective, it's like not, I guess, that different from Panharmonicon for Godo. And so maybe like the deck would consider it because of that. I haven't talked to any Godo pilots about the card, so I'm not entirely sure where they're at on it. You know, it's a very interesting design, and
yeah, for sure.
It's, I think, maybe one card being printed away from potentially being more broken. Right now, it's sort of again in that space where it doesn't do anything broken enough.
Yeah, I agree.
Moving on to a card that is broken by design. It's just generically good, period, end of story, is the real Vi of the set, in my opinion.
You mean not the next card that we're going to talk about?
That is a Vi, but it's not the Vi.
Oh, okay. Sure.
Also, I'm pretty sure that Vi would probably shoot an arrow through my face if I called her Vi.
Possible, but we'll get to that.
Read any of the lore of that character. But the card I'm talking about is Professional Facebreaker. It is a 2 colorless and a red human warrior that is a 2/3, has fucking menace. Whenever one or more creatures you control deal combat damage to a player, create a treasure token. And then it has a second ability where you can sacrifice a treasure, exile the top card of your library. You may play that card. So, Michael, I would usually come back to you, but it's a warrior, so I have to talk to Pongo here.
That's fair.
So, Pongo, obviously, this card is really generically good. And I'll give you a chance here in a second to talk about Nixilis, but this is like a card that's very similar, that probably adds a lot of value to a deck like Prosper, right?
Yeah. Well, it's exactly like what you said. It's a generically good card. You know, and like, let's forget for a second that it's warrior, because this card is playable regardless of the creature type.
Like any red deck can play this card.
Well, any red deck could play it. Not every red deck will play it, I think.
Yeah.
But
I think that's very true.
But I think a lot of red decks are going to play it. Basically, to put it simply, it's mana and cards. It makes mana and it gives you cards, and that's everything we want. Like always. As far as Nixilis is concerned, Nixilis loves generically good cards. Like, we just love generically good cards. And then you make it a warrior, and we're just like, holy shit, it's the second coming of Grob. Like,
and it when you can't fully combo off, right? This gets you close.
Yeah, it gets you close.
You can do multiple combats.
Yep, and it has menace, so that's good too. It gives you an extra warrior token. It's evasive, so blockers are less relevant. I
will say, Impulse Draw is a lot worse in decks that aren't really you can't just accrue value with Impulse Draw that well. And I think people overestimate how good Impulse Draw is in decks that aren't trying to use this to win in one turn.
You say that, but in my testing, it has been great regardless. So I will acknowledge that it is not card draw, but the amount of times where it's just been okay, I have 2 treasures and I have to counter the thing, and it's I sacrifice 2 treasures and oh, there you go. It's a counter spell. Yeah. Let's go. This game is not over yet.
But that's the way you have to think about it, right? You can't just generically post combat start cracking treasures for cards.
No.
Because you're going to get things like counter spells.
Right. But
you're going to feel
you
bad.
can use those on your turn to defend your cards, for instance.
So when you want to have a big turn, this is great because you're going to try to use those counters anyways. But when you're not trying to have a big turn, it's better used on your opponent's turn. So you want to be a deck with counter spells and a lot of removal.
It's almost like a 1 mana Urza activation. You know what I mean? In the sense that there's some timing restriction in some awkwardness there. But 1 mana instead of 5.
Yeah.
The one thing I will say, this is one of those cards where I look at it for Arden Crom and I'm like, I think I play this. The problem then becomes what am I cutting for this, right? And which is
just cut a land. It's fine. It makes treasures.
Yeah, that's fine. You've been hanging around Phoenix too long.
Phoenix, listen, just mulligan like Phoenix. Your second 7 has Jeweled Lotus and a Mana Crypt and 2 lands. You know what I mean? Every game.
What are you talking about? Every game that I've ever played against you on Nixilis, you somehow either have a turn 1 or 2 Nixilis, literally.
The amount of times I need to sacrifice a Tinderwall and play a Chromox to make that happen is very high compared to the amount of times that Phoenix has a Jeweled Lotus to cast his 4-drop commander.
He does get Prosper out very often, but it was okay. I did play Grafdigger's Cage immediately after that. So it was, or no, it wasn't Grafdigger's Cage. It was
Drannith Magistrate.
Drannith.
Yeah.
Drannith's card. But no, it's one of those cards where I look at this in Arden Crom and I'm like, okay, so I definitely want to play this because it fits the bill of what you guys are describing, right? It's a reactive deck. It's a mana hungry deck, and it's also a card advantage hungry deck. And so this checks both boxes. The question then becomes, when I draw this, what's the window that I feel? Because where I always come down, especially with that deck, is trying to evaluate the cards within the context of, okay, there's a rule of law down. Because I feel like if you're playing a deck that's built around rule of laws, you kind of need to assess your cards under the assumption that you will have a rule of law out. And so that's where I'm not sure. And I know
you're not going to cast multiple spells if you exile.
Right. And cards. And it's one of those things where in my mind, I look at it and I go, okay, if I get this down before a rule of law, it's great. If I get it down after a rule of law, it's much less good because now I'm putting myself wide open to getting one of my core pieces that are on the field bounced. And that's kind of the weird place that I'm in. I'm saying this because I actually have a reasonable following of people that do watch my Jeskai Arden stuff. So I do feel inclined that I do have to mention this. It's just I don't know.
The decks where it's sweetest are ones that are doing dockside loops already.
Yeah.
Because it basically just says if you dockside loop, you win the game.
Yep.
And I was thinking about it for the deck we'll talk about a little bit later for a new commander in the set. Because there are versions of the deck where the goal is to dockside loop, and now you've just win the game.
GG.
You don't even need to loop dockside because if you are at a situation where you don't need the mana, then dockside can become a card draw spell now, which is
yeah, exactly.
Messed
which
up.
Is really good.
Yeah.
So
ban dockside, please.
Yes.
I hate that card. Next card on the list is the third. It's a Vi, but isn't the Vi. I guess this is actually the Vi because that is her name, is Vivien the Hunt. I actually don't know the lore why Vivien's on the plane, but she looks rad as hell. This is a 4 colorless and 2 green planeswalker that comes in at 4 loyalty. Has a -1 of create a 4/4 green rhino warrior creature token. What is it with this set and just giving Nixilis stuff?
I'm not playing this card, bro.
I know you weren't playing this, but even there is this is one of the things I said that annoys the hell out of me out of Nixilis is that every card that has the text warrior on it is suddenly like, oh, well, this might be a Nixilis card.
I want them to print another warrior tribal commander that does something more interesting.
It does combo in Nixilis though. It combos in Nixilis. We'll get to that.
Sort of, yeah.
But anyway, it's insert that meme I made of the John Mulaney meme where it could be an on fire. It could be an on fire garbage can.
Yeah,
could be a Nixilis card. But this isn't an on fire garbage can. Trust me. Its other +1 is mill 5 cards, then put any number of creature cards milled this way into your hand. So those 2 abilities, they're pretty alright, right? Then Vivien has a +2. You may sacrifice a creature. If you do, search your library for a creature card with mana value equal to 1 plus the sacrificed creature's mana value. Put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle. So this is it is very much a, what's it called? A
birthing pod or perennial form or whatever.
There's one thing that I think is really interesting about the way this was worded is you +2 it. If somebody is going to op agent you, they have to op agent you before you sack the creature.
Right.
And it's a May. So you +2 somebody op agent. I'm saying this for the help of the world. So you +2 it, somebody goes, okay, if they try to do it after you sacrifice something, they've missed their window of opportunity. They have to do it while the activation is on the stack. But so anyway, Michael.
And it's stupidly the +2. This ability should be one of the minus abilities.
This
is an Oko mistake. This is a we put something that starts with high loyalty, and we made its best ability a plus.
Except it's a 6 drop.
I'm stocking up on stuff that doesn't care that it's a 6 drop. Plainbound Accomplice.
So yeah, what are you doing? You are +2ing. You're sacking a 3 drop. You're getting Philidar Guardian. You're flipping over Vivien. You're +2ing again. Sacrifice the cat. Go get Karmic Guide. Karmic Guide brings back the cat. Blinks the Vivien. And now you do it again and get Kiki Jiki. Kiki Jiki the Karmic Guide. Karmic Guide puts back Philidar. Philidar blinks Kiki Jiki. And there you go.
And this is modern legal.
Yeah, this is modern legal. And why I say it's a combo with Nixilis? Nixilis is a 3 CMC creature in your command zone.
Right.
So like, this is a 1-card combo with any deck that has a commander that's 3 CMC.
Yep.
And is in at least Naya. That's like crazy. So the deck that we'll talk about later, there are some turbo builds of that deck that are playing this because that commander is technically 3 CMC. Like, there's
I mean, that's like the deck that's playing it, right? Is Minsk.
Yeah,
and
we're talking about another one.
Minsk is gonna play. We're talking about another one, but also Blood Pod just doesn't need to worry about the Blood Pod problem.
The pod part.
The problem we used to have of playing Null Rod and playing Birthing Pod. Right. Now it's I can sack my Tymna to start the combo.
Yep.
So now it has like a legitimate win con, which is a huge deal. So like this is a crazy card. This is just a. It's 6 mana, so I know it's like a little more forgiving to make a design mistake on a 6 mana card.
Mm-hmm.
But this ability, should have been like -2 or -3, so that if they did Oppo Agent, you couldn't use the ability. You couldn't just do it next turn.
Mm-hmm.
Now, they can drop their Op Agent. It's going to be +6. If it gets back to you, you do it again. And it has 6 loyalty, so it might get back to you.
Yeah, but it's fine for 6 mana cards to be like kind of stupid. It's not going to be a mistake.
The thing is that I will say my issue with it is specifically, there's cards like this in Modern that.
What is this?
I'm showing this to camera.
Yeah.
This is Plainbound Accomplice, right?
Where Sneak Attack
for
you literally just
on audio only. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a Plainbound Accomplice, which, for our Magic, Magic, what's it called? Stocks friends.
The stocks. The Magic Finance people.
Yeah, your Magic Finance people might want to pick up some copies of Plainbound Accomplice because I hear that is part of a new combo deck that'll be legal in Streets of New Capenna. Pick up your copies of Plainbound Accomplice now. Actually, I don't sound enough like what's the guy on MSNBC?
Rudy?
The mad money guy. Do you know what I'm talking about? Yeah,
I know you're talking about.
He'll be yelling.
You're also not telling people to use our affiliate link to do.
Yeah,
so.
our affiliate link. Yeah. You should, by the way, if you do want to pick up copies of Plainbound Accomplice or Vivien, use our affiliate link to TCG Player, which is in the description below.
That combo is especially egregious because the card that cheats Vivien to play is what you can pod into the combo.
Exactly.
It's so egregious.
This can literally go off on turn 3 very consistently in Modern.
Yeah. And so this card probably shouldn't have been designed the way it was designed. It just probably shouldn't have. But it's a new win con, and I think a lot of stack decks are going to play it.
I think, even that sort of the Modern case, we're talking about the axis of a creature that you need to interact with that is summoning sick too. So
no. It doesn't care about summoning sickness.
The Plainbound Accomplice.
It doesn't need to tap. It's just a red mana to activate.
It's a single red mana. So, but you need
4
mana. So to do it,
you need 4 mana.
So to do it on turn 3, it's effectively summoning sick, unless you have somehow a lot of fast mana in Modern.
Thank you for banning Simian Spirit Guide.
You have Ragavan. That's just gonna be a Ragavan.
So turn 1 Ragavan, turn 2 you can play it for 3 mana, and then you don't have a red mana to activate it.
So you do it on turn 3. You can save your treasure.
But somebody has removal
treasures, right? You can stock them.
Yeah.
But if you stock 2 turns in a row, now you have 2 red mana. Now you can.
If you have multiples of these, then on turn 4 you could threaten a win again.
Well, that's kind of the thing, right? Is I think in Modern, I would stock up on these and then sell them really fast because I anticipate this card is gonna get banned.
Yeah, but consider this too, right? you're talking about a 4-mana combo in Modern, turn 4 to do it all on the same turn. That's considered acceptable by Modern design standards.
No, it's turn 3 because you go
not consistently
Land
though. Not consistently turn 3.
But you don't play the Ragavans. Kess has like thoroughly built this deck.
You play another dork, right? So
you go land dork, turn 2, this is 3 mana, and then you just literally have to play another land.
Okay, but you need this and a mana dork in your opening hand. So you need one and then you also need the Vivien in your hand.
Yeah, but you're in a 60 card
but that's still you're still asking for 3 specific cards. So that's not a that's not a given.
Eldamri's call is legal in that format.
But then you're not turn 3ing it, so right? And on turn 4,
but it's the point is
on turn 4 it's fair game. Like
Plainbound Accomplice is going to end up being the getting kind of shot with the birthing pod ban, in my opinion, in Modern. Not to like take us off topic, but I do think Plainbound Accomplice will probably end up getting banned because of the fact that it just does aggressively do this, where it does just aggressively put, like, you can just put it out like turn after turn.
And it's a Splinter Twin problem too, where people, they don't like the play pattern of you have to keep up interaction from turn 3 on or you lose, while the other player can just play their spells, right? Because once you put the accomplish in play, like, you can just hold up interaction, wait till next turn to do anything with it, right? Like, you don't need to. You can just leave it there, right? It's fine.
You can literally just use it. You can literally just set a gun on the table and then be like, okay.
Well, I mean,
it's not as good because you can't go over the top in speed, but like, you basically just say, I don't need to commit to the Vivien going into play or anything. I can just put the accomplish in play and wait till next turn to untap. And if you want to remove this thing that I'm not doing anything with, that's kind of fine, because eventually I just get to 6 mana.
We're talking about a world where, like, people are also playing like 2 mana 8/8s with flying, right? And and they're doing that on turn 4. Or people are playing 1 mana 13/13s, like, and then they're also holding up interactions. So it's,
I'm just saying, I play Belcher, and Belcher is like a turn 3 deck,
right?
Turn 4 deck, and you do have turn 2s that are possible. Like, this deck will probably find a way to have turn 2s. I don't know how, but it will. This is better because you don't have to do much to deck construction, and
the deck kind of just builds itself.
Right? You don't even really need it's like the twin problem in that you can just play your like grindy creature based game with interaction with hate bears maybe, and then just play the Vivien without cheating it out on turn 6 and still.
Yeah, I mean, I think it'll be good, but I don't think it'll be disproportionately good compared to a lot of the other things in the format. Modern is very powerful, and the interaction is very powerful too.
Yeah. But I will say this, I do think like it does kind of skirt around the like force of negations and the like type of interaction that people generally play, because I know that a lot of people have moved off path.
I mean, it's still vulnerable Solitude, to bold.
But like,
yeah, but like, I'm fine with them wasting their Solitude, like where they can't Solitude the Planner Bound Accomplished. If they do, you get your Vivien. Yeah, it's going to die at the end of the turn, but you can still do something with your Vivien, right? Like, they've just stopped you from winning, but you've made them waste a card, and you've accrued a ton of. You made a Rhino where you drew like 3 cards off the -1 or the +1. Like, you can do a bunch of stuff, and that's, I think,
considering this is a deck that I presumably is going to be a amount of lands, an amount of dorks, and then creatures pretty much like all the way through that aren't like Eladamri's Call. That is a lot of cards that are just going to go into your hand.
Yeah. So like in cEDH, I expect you will see this in all of the Naya Plus.
Yep.
Yeah.
Hate Bear decks.
Well, I think
I think Blood Pod is like literally a deck again. This like brings Blood Pod into being a deck again.
Yeah.
I've thought that deck has been horrible for a really long time. Nope. Not when it has a 1-card win con and it has black. And the 3-mana creature it needs to put into play to make it happen is Tim.
I mean, that deck has had multiple 1-card win conditions for some time now, right? And I think that the argument against Blood Pod has been a little bit overstated.
But I do think playing Null Rod with Birthing Pod sucked.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Like, there was just times it couldn't win with its own 1-card win cons. Now that is no longer a problem.
Yes,
like, it can play all the hate it wants.
No doubt.
And that's such a
huge
big deal
for the deck. Yeah, like no disagreement there. And I think that we're going to see an uptick of Blood Pod type decks as a result of this card. But
including my deck, which is better Blood Pod. We'll talk about that later.
I just think that a lot of the arguments that have been made against Blood Pod historically have been a little bit they were true until more recently, and then I don't think that people started playing Blood Pod again because they were true. Like for example in the Hulk meta, right? And then for whatever reason, people haven't picked up the deck again. Probably because Winota kind of overshadows it with the strength of her value engine mainly. But this will give the archetype a boost for sure. If only because it's going to get people looking at it again, and that's usually what it takes.
So one of the other interesting things about this card is this is like objectively, in Sans blue decks, the best Arena Rector target. 100%. Now, depending on the situation in blue Arena Rector decks, it may still be the better option, but like they're especially in Rector Fit, right? Like the whole idea of being able to play Arena Rector is that you can use it to get your Jace and do that like sort of thing at instant speed and like kind of be able to do all of these things. Like you don't need to be able to don't mind me, I'm just fiddling. It's like to be able to do those sorts of like things on top of other people's win attempts. And so like I think this is about on par with Jace as the best Arena Rector target in like blue decks that play these sorts of arena, like a Rector style decks.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, for decks, if you want to use it as your win con, you need to pack in a bunch of cards that you want. Like, does your deck want to play Kiki Jiki?
Yeah, so it's tough, right? Because what you were saying, you're talking about Arena Rector, so we're automatically in green-white, but then you were also talking about blue decks, so we're in Bant, but then for this to be a win condition, you probably want to be in red as well. So you have to be like at least in Sans black.
So one thing that you can do with this in like Rector Fit, right, is you can use this to set up Arena Rector lines. So like if you don't have a way to get your, or not Arena Rector, Academy Rector, you can turn your Arena Rector into an Academy Rector and then use that as, because you sacrifice like you pull this in, you sacrifice your Tymna, get an Arena Rector,
and then
or your Spellseeker. Yeah, and then you sacrifice that, and then you can like kind of begin in going about doing your win. So it does set up your win attempt or your win lines in those decks as well, but it has to be playing both Rectors in order to do that.
Yeah.
Right.
Which again goes back to my argument that both Rectors are very good. And so I stand by. Everybody was like, well, you should play Arena Rector. Why are you playing Arena Rector? And I'm like, it's pretty damn good card. Turns out Jace being able to win the game. People are too low on Jace, in my opinion. Like, people just are like, oh, you can't play Jace. It's not very good. Just play Thoracle. Like, I'm sorry. I like having multiple ways to win the game.
Me too, but one always has to be Infect every time. Gotta always have a backup Infect win con.
Next card on the list is a card that is it's not the obligatory Arden card, believe it or not, but it is a very exciting card. This is Luxior, Giada's Gift. And this is so stupid. Why is it 1 mana? It is 1 colorless mana.
Because Saga has to be able to get it. That's why.
Urza Saga can get it, and that's what just drives me nuts. And it has the ability, equipped creature gets +1/+1 for each counter on it. And it has equip Planeswalker for 1 and equip for 3. And its other equipped ability is equipped permanent isn't a Planeswalker and is a creature in addition to its other types. Or, yes. So, there's
and
a couple...
the really important text, loyalty abilities can still be activated.
Yeah.
Which is like, why isn't it a Planeswalker anymore? Now it's an unattackable Planeswalker.
Right.
That's also getting bigger.
Yeah.
So I do want to acknowledge one part of this because we've gotten so many of them recently because it's felt like you just sneeze and you get a new what's it called?
Devoted Druid?
Devoted Druid combo. Which is,
and they reprinted Devoted Druid in the
I'm so glad that they did
the
that
magic
so that card doesn't spike.
Are in shambles.
So
I will
fast.
say, I did just buy a single Devoted Druid, not even to use with this, because I just like the card, and I bought it when it was like $6, and I was like, this is ridiculous. It's a $6 common, and then of course they reprinted.
Excuse you,
but
I bought my Devoted Druid when it was my first set of Devoted Druids, I should say, was right when Collected Company, right when what is it? Vizier of
Company.
Remedies got printed,
that one, yeah.
and that card jumped up to like $12.
Yeah,
and I bought mine at $11.
For what it's worth,
it was
this
before
is like
the
not
reprint.
a real reprint either. Like it's
Yeah.
So you don't have to feel too bad, Michael. Like it's not going to impact the price.
Oh,
that
and also
much.
the original printing is aesthetically much more pleasing,
right.
So it's okay.
I actually like the new printing more, but
I do.
I do prefer the new. That's why I sold my ones from what's that set called?
Shadowmoor?
Yeah, Shadowmoor,
Yeah,
whatever. And got into Ultimate Masters ones because I like those ones more. Anyway,
tell us down in the comments below which one
them.
you prefer.
Yeah, let us know. Engage. But this does combo with that. I think that is important to note because of the fact that, like we said, we've seen a lot of people doing. I want to bring this up because I've seen this a lot in the Ardent community of people putting Swift reconfiguration onto Devoted Druid. While there is a Null Rod in play, and this kind of goes back to your frustration, Michael, of people playing these abilities that
anti-synergies,
conflict with each other.
Non-both.
This keeps it a creature, and Arden can still free attach it. So you can still make infinite mana and get to play your Collector Roof and get to play your Null Rod.
And Stoneforge tutors it.
Exactly.
It's easier to tutor. It's like
it is so much better than Swift reconfiguration as a combo with Devoted Druid. It's insane. But anyhow, so there's that. But then there's also the application, Pongo, where we've been seeing a lot of people talk about this card within the context of Tevesh.
Yeah, so you mean I don't get to play this card in the MLC is what you're getting at, right, Callahan?
Yes, unfortunately. It is like I said, it needs to go through a year of college before it has draft eligibility.
Yeah.
Oh my god, Tevesh commander damage.
Well, yeah, exactly. So Tevesh gets huge, unbelievably huge, super quickly. And can no longer be attacked. Well, so hard to deal with, but Tevesh is actually hard to deal with already because Tevesh makes blockers so well. So actually, I think Tevesh might get easier to deal with after you equip this because now creature removal hits it.
Yeah.
So,
but like when you're swinging with your 10/10 Tevesh,
right?
People better get that removal fast.
That's it. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So he kills very quickly, and I think that is probably, worth maybe the risk of your Tevesh getting Gilded Draked. I don't know. We'll have to see.
Tevesh Kodama, it's like you're already going to be able to fit the Devoted Druid combo in there. So
I guess, but the infinite mana in that
Thrasios is where this is really good, right?
You want the infinite mana combo, incidentally. Yeah. I that's kind of like the only real reason why I would find it compelling in Tevesh Thrasios, because just having a big Tevesh I don't think is enough. Again, because you do run the risk of him getting hit by more types of removal now, him getting Gilded Draked now, which is like pretty devastating. But if you can also equip it to a Devoted Druid and make infinite mana for your Thrasios, then that's pretty nice. So
the issue I have with it is, like, in Arden Thrasios, does it fix the like Bant like tension between what Arden wants to do and what Thrasios wants to do?
That's an existing tension even in Sultai, because the Sultai decks, I think that if you're playing Thrasios X, Thrasios plus Draw Engine, basically, you pretty much want to be playing Collector Roof, because Thrasios really pushes you towards playing a sort of more late game value strategy, because he's just totally ineffective early on. So you really want to be playing the Collector Roofs to extend the game. And so, now suddenly having an equipment in that shell is a little bit awkward. So it's cool to theory craft about this card and like think about all the applications. Whether or not it ends up being better than like existing options is questionable. That being said, for Arden, it seems good because you don't have that tension.
You still do have like the weird like Bant tension of like, do we play onboard pieces or do we play stuff in our hand? Or it's just like that weird, like I feel like Bant is just like a weird place to play in general. Like it just is there. I feel like there's some natural tension between what blue-white as a color pairing wants to do and what green-white wants to do as a color pairing. And especially with a deck like Arden decks tend to be very white-centric. So you're basically you like green, or you have to decide, is blue my support color here or is green my support color here? And green is a horrible support color. So like it's awkward because it forces you into playing it kind of like it tells you you're either playing blue with very limited green, or you're going green and the blue is here to like full-blown green-white creatures, and then you have some blue here to back up that stuff. I've talked about this on Twitter too, is just like Arden Thrasios is just such an awkward ass deck. Anyway. Next card
now
on
for
our
the
list.
Fun cards.
For the fun cards.
3 color cards.
Cormela Glamour Thief. I feel like I'm about to excuse me. So it is
Grixis good stuff again.
It's Grixis good stuff. It's 4 mana or 4 CMC Grixis. It costs the same way as Kess. It's a 2/4 with haste. It has the ability, activated ability that costs 1 to tap, and you add a blue, black, and red, and you can only spend this mana on instants and sorcery spells. And when it dies, return up to 1 target instant or sorcery card from your graveyard to your hand. So, Michael, we've talked about this a little bit beforehand. This is a pretty, like, it's going to end up running into the same issues that Kess runs into ultimately, right?
Yeah, like you can play it as a value Grixis commander because it's ramping you. It also gets back things from the graveyard so that you can, do your thing. I'm sure there's a way you're going to double Tainted Pact or something to get Oracle. The interesting thing, at least, is that there are combos, like this combos with Twin Flame to make infinite blue and black mana. And there's probably a way to capitalize on that. There's other cards that have not been printed yet, but have been spoiled that it also combos with. I know, we have opinions about talking about these cards. It's on half, obviously. Yeah. It combos with. Is it better than the other Grixis options? I don't know, but it's the kind of card that has enough things it does that I'm sure you will see it in pods.
Right.
It's not as good as Inala, but it does things. And it does a thing that, is kind of the Inala thing. And people like that. And you get to play Grixis.
Grixis Turbo Naz plus 1 card win condition is an existing shell. whether it's Inala or just like Malcolm Vile, like it's kind of a known quantity. So, you know, we can add this to the Grixis character select screen, I guess. And
yeah.
And like probably it's not quite as good as a couple of the other options, but it's there. You know, it's there. It's going through its idle animation, waiting for you to pick it, and maybe someone picks it.
And I said this pre-show when we were talking about some of the other commanders, is like, I do think that there is room in our format for like these sorts of commanders to still be playable and still be worth your time. I mean, hell, I play Greasefang. Like, I am all for like playing, like, you don't have to play just Kess or Rog Silas or Malcolm Vile. Like, you can play these things. It's just like, I look at this and I'm like, the issues I already have with like the Grixis commanders just kind of get amplified with this card, where I'm just like, this runs into all the same issues that Kess runs into, but doesn't really have the same advantages of Kess, but does have a unique advantage that Kess doesn't have, with its being sort of a pseudo mana dork. So it's weird. But yeah,
I'm sure people will play it.
Yeah, and that's fine. Yeah. Like, people thought that 11 in Mike was going to be like the second coming of Christ, and then it turned out that deck was fine.
It's not bad. It's good.
Yeah,
I like it.
It's perfectly fine.
Yeah.
But people saw like the 11 card, and were just like, "Oh, this card is so good! Oh my gosh!" And it like ended up being like fine.
Yeah, every time I've played against that deck, 11 never gets cast.
Yeah.
So yeah,
it's Mike that gets cast if I see something. Yeah.
Next card on our list is the new best World Gorger Dragon commander, which, if you ask Mike and I, doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
But this is Evelyn the Covetous. It cost 2 colorless, a blue-black hybrid, one singular black, and a black-red hybrid. So you can use a Jeweled Lotus to cast this card and 2 colorless mana, but that is a thing you can do. You can also Dark Ritual into this, which is also important to note, because it has Flash. And whenever Evelyn or another vampire enters the battlefield under your control, exile the top card of each player's library with a collection counter on it. Once each turn, you may play a card from exile with a collection counter on it if it was exiled by an ability you controlled, and you may spend mana as though it were any color to cast it. So it's interesting. One, it's evocative of Jaleva, but 2 is it seems they learned their mistake from Dothy, because I bet you money that the clause of if it was exiled by you was not there before they released Dothy Voidwalker.
Yeah, the Dothy wars are ridiculous.
But this is like, ultimately, Pongo, this is a World Gorger Dragon deck, probably the best one, although World Gorger Dragon, is that really where you want to be?
For those people who don't know how the combo would work with this, you actually are just going to slip Evelyn in using Flash at some point, let the World Gorger keep doing its thing to exile everyone's libraries, and then end the loop by targeting something else. So it's not like make infinite mana. The infinite mana is actually pretty much unnecessary in this combo. It's about bringing this in and out of play infinitely, which is kind of nice. It does solve some problems that exist. And to be honest, the cool thing about Evelyn is, like, before your turn where you're going to World Gorger Dragon, you could just flash it in, exile a bunch of cards, and then maybe you have a counterspell backup now that you've exiled. Like, you could even do it, I kind of like it even as a Grixis Nas commander, now that I think about it more, because you just flash it in like a mini little ad Nas thing. Like, you immediately get 4 cards.
That's true.
And then, it's actually, outside of the World Gorger Shell, it's still a cool card. 5 mana is a lot for that effect.
I mean, you're definitely playing this as an Adnos deck, unless you want to play Reanimator, but...
Hey, listen, they play fucking Runescarred Demon and World Gorger Dragon in some builds of Mad Farm where that's a turbo Nos, or also supposed to be a Nos deck. So, like, they can play World Gorger Dragon. Adnos people are insane.
No, you can 100% play World Gorger Dragon. Like,
So I think it's interesting in that way. That, like, it actually is like Jaleva, but slightly better, I think, because it has flash, so you don't have to cast it on your turn. You keep up your interaction, and then end of turn you put it in play, and now you have your spells.
And your ability to cast the spells is not tied to combat either, which is very relevant.
Yep, and it's on each turn, not just your turn, so you can cast all of them eventually, which is why it really is an actual factual draw for.
Right.
There is, I guess, a world in which you play other vampires in this deck, and that triggers, like, you play the Mad Farm plays the one with Menace that you sack it and discard a card to draw a card. Like, you could play it in this deck, and it's now a 1 red draw 4 that you can rummage with. Like, so I guess there's probably some cool stuff you could do with this card.
That card's pretty relevant.
World Gorger Dragon decks are bad.
Yeah.
World Gorger Dragon decks are decks that end up with no permanents on the battlefield and crying. So I
will say the point you did bring up about being able to flash it in the turn before you go off.
Yeah.
And then, like, exile things and then have some backup, I will say is a point in this World Gorger Dragon deck's favor.
Yeah. Yeah.
I still don't think World Gorger Dragon is good, but
it's almost like you're playing, layered Consult World Gorger Dragon at this point, and World Gorger Dragon is kind of compact of a combo, right? Like, you're going to be playing Breach stuff, so the Entomb is still kind of useful. You can have Intuition piles with World Gorger Dragon that you can make them, they exist. So, like, I think you could do a cool deck. Is it better than the other Grixis ones? I don't know, but it's again another Grixis option where you layer your Oracle Pact with something else that is kind of interesting. And I like that this one has card advantage tied onto it, so that's good. Like, if it just said exile the top and nothing else, like, it would be a lot less interesting. It would be an outlet, but it would be less interesting. Now it's kind of cool. It sets up a cool control-y shell for an Adnos deck or something. I don't know. So there's things you can do with it, and I like it. But I won't play it, but I expect someone to.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, it's interesting in the sense that, like, theoretically you can pull off that entire combo over a couple of turns through a rule of law and even, like, lots of other types of stacks effects. But, if that's what you were looking for in Grixis, you obviously just have, like, Malcolm Vial as well. That kind of does that sort of similar thing. So, I don't know. It's, again, it's another option. I agree with that assessment.
The one thing I will say about this deck that I do think is kind of interesting is, Pongo, you and I have talked about this before, is ever since they printed single color partners, there's kind of been this issue in Grixis, well, 3-color decks in general, right? Where unless your commander does something really, really special, why are you not playing... Like Zer's run into this problem, right? Where it's like, well, why don't you just play Malcolm Timna or Sakashima Timna, right? Like, it's just like, you can just have the Timna, and, like, unless you are doing something really special with your 1 card costs 3 of a different color commander, it's kind of hard to justify not running partners in these 3-color pairings. This kind of fixes that issue with this particular design of how they costed this commander. So they gave it the Grixis color identity, but you could play this with only black mana spent on it. And I do think that makes it a little bit more viable than Jaleva, than Kess, in my opinion, because of the fact that, like, it's so much easier to cast than the rest of the field.
I don't think it's better than Kess. I mean, I could maybe see an argument for Jaleva in the sense that, like, Jaleva, the value proposition in many situations can be hard to realize. But, like, the idea with Kess, you know, depending on how you build her, she can be very synergistic with kind of the generic Grixis, like Turbonaw's plan.
The double tainted pack thing is already just so
well, that's
good, right?
kind of just like the icing on top, or the cherry on top, as far as I'm concerned. You know, I think that, you know, her real strength is just like Nas. Nas gets countered. All right, here's Kess. All right, I'm gonna Nas again.
Right.
And like, you know, she's kind of just like
I would say this is like on par
will
with
or a
Kess.
regrowth in the command zone. This is very different from that respect because you're getting only one card from each opponent's library. You know what I mean? Like, you're not necessarily digging that deeply, and you're not necessarily recovering so effectively as a result if you're using her that way.
So the way I look at this is the fact that it has flash, does net you some amount of card advantage, also has a big booty, by the way, is a 2/5. Like, Evelyn is a thick lady. I guess in my mind, I look at this and I go, from a single commander perspective in 3 colors, this is much more appealing to me to try and play because I can play stuff like Jeweled Lotus. It's a lot easier to cast, and especially in colors where you don't have access to mana dorks, I think that is somewhat important with your like single commander, like Grixis commanders, because there is a limit of the fact that Kess kind of has like a turn, like cap put on her, if that makes sense, where unless you get like an insane opening hand, you know, Kess can't come down on turn 1, where very easily you can just go land Jeweled Lotus, Dark Writ, crack my Jeweled Lotus, play this.
Sure.
Like, it's very easy to just play this on turn 1, as compared to other single commander Grixis options, I guess is kind of my thought.
That's fair enough. Yeah.
And the other thing it does is it does do the doggy thing. It just has to have been exiled by an ability you control, so you can accumulate them.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's kind of nice. It creates a second hand for you since it's your commander.
There's also a lot of like decent vampires too that you can play. So like,
yeah. So that's why I think this is like a fine option for someone to try to play. Like, I think this is a deck that would be very reasonable to play. And if someone brought it to cEDH Pod, I'd be like, oh, cool, this is going to be interesting. I would not think anything negative.
For sure.
The next card on our list is a card
I would think negatively about this next card.
Yeah, I think very negatively of this card. This is Maestrose Ascendancy. It costs Grixis to cast, so it's blue, black, red. And it is an enchantment that says once during each of your turns, you may cast an instant or sorcery spell from your graveyard by sacrificing a creature in addition to paying its other costs. If a spell cast this way would be put into your graveyard, exile it instead. Now, before we go into anything, I just want to ask, there was a lot of clamor I saw on Twitter about this card and how, oh my gosh, you can like double Tainted Pact with this. That's amazing. You could take it pack for
Kess at
Thoracle,
home.
play your Thoracle, and then Tainted Pact sacking your Thoracle. And I'm just sitting there and I'm like, Kess is just sitting there like, have I not existed for like 5 years? Like, so I'm going to posit this question to you guys. Would you play Kess? So both of you can answer this. We'll start with Michael. Don't give any explanation. Just tell me yes or no. Michael, would you play Kess in the 99 of a Grixis based or just a base Grixis deck or a Grixis X deck?
No, I would not.
Pongo, would you play Kess in the 99 of your Grixis list?
Is this like circa 2019 Legacy or something? Like,
No, we're playing cEDH right now. Would you play Kess in the 99?
No, I mean, I can't really imagine a situation. It's possible that I've even tried it before in the past. Like, that doesn't surprise me.
Yeah.
And it's not something that I've clearly stuck with. So
this is what I'm going to ask. Literally, the question, anytime anybody brings this card up to me, I'm going to posit this question to you, because this is worse Kess. Not only is it harder to tutor in the colors that you're in, like, yes, you can, like, demonic tutor for it, sure, whatever. But, like, why are you not just playing Kess that is a body and you don't have to sack a thing?
So I will say that at least it's hard to interact with, being an enchantment and not a creature. But these days, so much interaction is
non-land
permanent.
Right.
Yeah.
It barely matters. So I think that, like, for this effect to be something you want, it has to be like 2 mana.
Yeah.
It has to be like
Underworld
a black
Breach?
red card for 2 mana.
Yeah, it's almost like
Exactly.
Underworld Breach
Underworld
exists.
Yeah.
Like, and it doesn't exile your card.
Yeah. So yeah, Pongo, you said this earlier, and I'm going to say it for you this time. People aren't playing Yawgmoth's Will anymore.
But
Why
are getting
would you play
excited
this
about
card?
this card.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So I don't expect to see this card being played.
I mean, this card is
I
strictly
100% to
better
see-
exiled under a Chrome Mox than a Yawgmoth's Will.
That's very true. We found the good application for the card.
Can't argue with that one.
I can't argue with that one. But yeah, it's anybody who plays this card, anybody who tries to argue that this card is good, I have a good reason for it. I'm going to ask you, would you play Kess in your 99? And unless you say yes, then take this card out of your deck and just play Underworld Breach. Thank me later. Play good cards.
But wait, what if you play it in Kess? And then you can cast 2 spells from your graveyard on your turn.
You can sack the
You can sack the Kess and replay it. You can play a 3rd spell on your own turn. All right, we better move on before we go too far. This is too powerful.
Speaking of powerful, have you ever wanted to play Grizzlebrand in cEDH? Do I have a card for you?
God, Michael, are you trying to take my job? Jesus. That was supposed to be my line. Yes, but no, that's a great segue. Our next card on this list is Nixilis, the Adversary, which is bizarrely only 3 mana. It costs 1 colorless, a black, and a red. Comes in with 3 loyalty, and it has Casualty X. Where as you cast the spell, you may sacrifice a creature with power X. When you do, copy this spell. The copy becomes a token, and it does say the copy isn't legendary and has a starting loyalty X. So whatever the CMC of the
mana value.
The power of the thing was.
Sure.
You get that many loyalty counters on the copy. So what activations does this have where it could come in with a bunch of counters, you might ask? Has a +1 where each opponent loses 2 life unless they discard a card. If you control a demon or devil, you gain 2 life.
So it just has a +1.
It just,
yes,
it has
your opponent
will lose 2 life and it gets 1 loyalty.
Yes.
Yeah.
Has a -2. That is create a 1/1 red devil creature token with when this creature dies, it deals damage to any target. All right. Tibble has that ability.
That's a -2.
That's
a lot of
-2.
loyalty to lose for a 1/1.
Yeah. Then it has a -7. And the -7 says target player draws 7 cards and loses 7 life. It's literally Grizzlebrand. Jesus Christ. So in Dargo decks, this is insane, right?
So I think that's the deck that plays this. Dargo with black, whatever the other card is. I guess there's Dargo Timna and
Dargo Jun Dargo.
Yeah, the Jun Dargo. You definitely play this because it's a 3 mana draw 7 that also leaves behind
another one
randomly. Yeah, which, do I think you're getting up to 7 again, starting at 3 with a +1? Probably not. But who knows? There's something you can do with it, I'm sure. Maybe you -1 and then you sack the creature to a culling of the week.
It's -2.
But -2.
Yeah.
But you're drawing 7 cards, and that's really good for 3 mana.
That's probably the biggest obstacle towards, ulting your other Ob Nixilis is the fact that you've just drawn 7 cards, and you should probably win at that point.
Yeah, exactly. So I think it's really cool in Dargo decks, and so I think we will see it being played in Dargo decks. I don't know what other decks are going to be able to do the casualty 7 or greater thing consistently and want to. Like, if you have a 7 power commander, isn't it supposed to be in play? Because probably part of it is that it has 7 power.
Right.
But it's like really cool in Dargo decks, so I'm sure Nathan is just so happy.
Nathan's smoking a big joint and just super excited. One card that our fellow Canadian friend, also a Torontoan, is really excited about is Raffine Scheming Seer. It is white, blue, and black to cast. A legendary Sphinx demon that is a 1/4 that has flying and ward 1. Whenever you attack, target attacking creature connives X, where X is the number of attacking creatures. And I have played against this stupid deck, and I hate it. Everything about it is miserable to play against. So, Pongo, walk us through this a little bit here.
I mean, it kind of does a lot of stuff that you want to be doing in these colors. And as we were talking about before with the connive ability, that is a very powerful ability. So it just so happens, Morgan, aka Spleenface, has sort of built this deck as, an Esper deck with like a lot of, like Nas themes. It's got some Reanimator themes to it. Actually, I'm not even sure that he's playing Nas. I feel like I might have seen it, but actually that might have been that other Esper commander that we're not going to talk about tonight. And I think Sick was playing that. But being able to bin your fatties and then reanimate them is really good. But more importantly is that Connive X, which can be like a lot of value really, really quickly, where you start attacking with this and a few small creatures, and then you start drawing a lot of cards and making it get very, very powerful very quickly.
You just dig for your console. It's just
it's so much draw power. And essentially any deck that would be playing a sort of Reanimator type of strategy in these colors could consider porting over to Raffine, just because he's much more efficient, being only 3 mana, or she. I'm not entirely sure about Raffine's pronouns in any case. But the Sphinx's ability to dig and to fill the graveyard is very, very powerful. And for only 3 mana with flying and, with a small amount of built-in protection is pretty relevant. I'm sure that ward is going to come up in many games where people are going to try to Gilded Drake this card, and they're going to fail.
Exactly, and not realize. Yeah. And this is a deck where you're going to be playing like Ledger Shredder, right? Like this is absolutely where that card shines, because not only does it increase the trigger on your commander, but it also has that trigger independently, so it synergizes with the overall theme of the deck. Like, this is a cool card. This might even be a deck where you're playing like main deck Malcolm.
Yeah, it's like a decidedly mid-range deck though. Because like it's just churning value.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very much a deck that is like in line with the team turn 3. The funny thing is we're called team turn 3, yet we are known to be the grindiest like stream team out there.
And yet a lot of our games end pretty quickly.
Yeah, but like our games are like notoriously grindy. Like we literally called the Coalition North Division a Hell Division because of how grindy the team turn 3, life is. Next card on our list is a card very near and dear to our good friend Dr. LeVine's. I forgot to call you Dr. Michael LeVine during the intro.
I wasn't gonna remind you.
Dr. LeVine's new. This might be replacing Heliod in his old little heart.
Oh, it has replaced Heliod.
Oh, wow, you heard it here first, folks.
It has.
That's the scoop.
I was already taking. I would be honest. I was already taking Heliod apart and basically just gonna because Armix, Timna, and Winota share about 30% cards, so my plan was just to switch between those two. And I completed both Armix, Timna, and Winota, and I was like, oh, I'll play my two favorite decks that I was already switching to in the MLC, so I drafted them very aggressively. And then they printed this card.
We have a new name for the video. It's no longer, is this the set that breaks cEDH? It's more, is this the set that breaks Heliod or stops Michael from playing Heliod?
That breaks apart Heliod. Yeah, it's Rocco Cavalletti Caterer, which is a 3/1 elf druid that costs X and red, green, white. When Rocco enters the battlefield, if you cast it, you may search your library for a creature card with mana value X or less, put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle. You literally started a Discord for this the day this card was spoiled.
Oh yeah, right away.
I got an invite from you to this Discord before I had even seen the card get spoiled.
Yeah, you reminded me
I didn't even
that I got
know,
one too. Yeah, come to think of it.
I didn't even know the card was a thing, and then I get this invite to Rocco's Modern Life, and I'm like, what the hell is this? And then I start reading it, and I'm like, oh, okay. So Michael, talk us through a bit about this deck.
This card is nuts. So the first thing everyone realized is that it is a Naya food chain outlet. Once you make infinite mana, you can now cast every creature in your deck, so you're gonna get something. You're gonna go somewhere. It also just basically becomes a one-card combo with a huge number of cards because it turns into the second card, whatever that second card needs to be. With Food Chain, it even can get the tutor for Food Chain, so it can get Moonblessed Cleric, which is, a wild thing that it can tutor. Your commander can tutor for Food Chain. You get Food Chain. Now your commander can tutor for Squee, and then pitch Squee to Food Chain to cast your commander again to be the outlet. So it is a 0-card combo, ultimately, in terms of Food Chain, because it both tutors for Food Chain, tutors for the card for Food Chain, and is the outlet. The other crazy thing is it just does, crazy stuff with Dockside Temur Sabertooth, where it's really easy to make infinite mana right there. There's an incredible number of lines, but it also is just a value commander. You play a stacks deck, and now you can just tutor for the right stacks piece when you need it at the beginning of the game. We can tutor for, your win con after you've already locked everything up. And the win cons after you Food Chain are all of the normal cool stacks win cons. You can do Kiki Jiki stuff, which is what I like to do. But you can do pretty much anything. It's just such a flexible card because it's insane. Why would you put a tutor for any creature thing in the command zone?
I understand why you and Rebel have kind of settled on not playing Vivien. What's the 3-mana Vivien that I'm thinking?
Vivien of the Wilds?
One for more. Yeah, Vivien of the Wilds. I understand your logic. I think you are incorrect because I think every Food Chain deck should be playing Vivien of the Wilds.
Yeah, I know that we talked about this a lot in the Discord, so there's a lot of builds of this in the Discord. That's the other really cool thing about this card. So when I saw it, I immediately was like, Hate Bears.
This is an uncommon?
It's uncommon.
They printed this. I just assumed it was a red or a rare at least, right? This is an uncommon?
This is an uncommon, which doesn't even make any sense because why would you want this in the draft environment?
What the hell?
Well, it's not that efficient in a draft. You're going to pay 6 mana for this in a 3-drop.
You get a lot of lands.
I guess.
So the cool thing in the Discord is that I immediately was Hate Bears. Rule of laws that are creatures that you can exile to Food Chain.
Mm-hmm.
You can play all the null rod effects because you don't really need to do Dockside loops if you don't want to. you can really just lock out the game, set up your food chain win, and win with the backup of you just have, your normal Kiki Jiki lines or whatever to go for to win the game. I find this deck, it's just like, it does what Heliod does, but better, because I get to play Null Rod effects. It gets the tutor for the Hate Bears. Like, Heliod had a huge problem with that. And, like, it just has a lot of ways to have alternative win conditions.
Right now,
you don't have to...
in my head, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but right now in my head, as you're, like, talking about how this does everything Heliod does, but better, I just hear Sarah McLaughlin's In the Arms of an Angels with, like, just pictures of, like, Heliod passing across the screen.
Earlier, we discussed how you can actually build food chain Rocco with Heliod as the win con, because already it can tutor Heliod and Ranger Captain to get Walking Ballista, or it could cast the Walking Ballista through food chain. But why would
Michael,
you do that?
Imagine you could do all this at instant speed if you played a Vivien of the Wilds in your deck. I get that it gets attacked into, but you could do all these things you're talking to and more for the price of 3 green mana. Or 2 colorless and a green.
I played Shimmermer. I understand. I even brought up Vernal Equinox in the Discord, which is obviously not a good card. But 3 and a green, players may cast enchantments and creatures as though they had flash. You can now do the whole combo at instant speed.
Right. But this is like I'm going to argue for Vivien here just a little bit, okay? Because of the fact that, so your big thing was, okay, so somebody goes in to attack it, right? And you have to commit resources to do it. Well, you have this beautiful thing in the command zone that also is a tutor that you can cast at instant speed. So you can just set up your Vivien, pass. If somebody swings into it, you instant speed tutor or cast Rocco. Literally just get like whatever amount you want to pay for it. You can block, putting Rocco back in the command zone, and then you get to do it again.
Yeah.
Why are you not playing Vivien? It's so good.
The better thing is to get Wirewood Symbiote, because Rocco is an elf for no reason, so you can untap one of your creatures and return Rocco to your hand so that you don't have to play the commander tax, which is like, now you get to tutor every turn. It's so dumb. And in a stack, I'm very happy to tutor for my best stacks piece every turn.
But you're making my argument for me, because if you do that, you get Wirewood Symbiote put into play, you declare Rocco as the blocker, and then you bounce it to your hand.
I know.
And then you replay it every turn.
I will probably playtest it again, but it didn't feel...
You literally made my argument for me! What are you doing, Michael?
I mean, it is mana intensive as a tutor, though, right?
It is intensive.
We're not going to do it repeatedly.
I do think that Vivien fixes a lot of the issue, and to be fair, Rocco also does this, but we've talked a lot about on this podcast how I think that food chain is kind of a flawed win con because of the rule of law world that we live in, and
I'm a rule of law deck,
right? But it also because of a lot of the facts that people can just do like ad nos stuff on top of it, and it just like doesn't matter. Whereas with Vivien fixes some of that food chain issue. Because of the fact that you're able to then, so if somebody tries to like do something on top of your like food chain, you're like, okay, cast it again.
Yeah, I mean that's why I use Shimmermer and Heliod, because the idea was to go on top of people while Rule of Law's in play, so like no one can really do anything because I'll just go on top of them. Yeah, I like that, but Shimmermer can't be attacked, and that I value very highly. I will probably playtest it again.
You know what? But here you go, pal. Here you go, bucko, buddy. There's this little card that got spoiled recently called Luxior, Giada's Gift. We talked about it. You can tutor that off an Urza Saga.
Yeah. I don't think I can afford Urza Saga in my 3-color deck right now, but maybe. But the cool thing, I think, is that we're talking about a stacks build, right?
Pongo looks so
I'm just like...
A lot of people are just building
I'm just like, it's turn 5. Like, when do you plan on doing all this stuff? Like, the game is over.
Exactly.
Like,
Exactly. But the turbo build people were talking about basically uses Vivien, the big Vivien, because Rocco is 3 mana value. So that means it starts the pod loop. And you know what you can do? You can use Rocco to get Rector, and then kill your Rector somehow, and now you've won the game. So people
that's
are
part of
working
the
on
issue, though, right? Is you have to have a sock outlet. So that's that.
Yeah.
Like,
So a lot of people are playing like crazy stuff like Thunderclap and Fury, all of these like free or 1 mana spells, so that you can just put the Rector in play and kill it right away.
Isn't Fury sorcery speed?
Yes.
Yeah, but what are they going to do? They're going to they have to bounce it in response, right? That's
why don't they just play like Goblin Bombardment?
Because that card sucks.
Didn't Rebel famously use that card to get into the finals of the MLC last year?
Yes, but that's a very different deck because you're playing Tana. You have dorks to really pitch to it that you want to.
Well, in this turbo build, though, isn't it kind of the same thing? Like,
well, I mean, like,
yes.
How many things do you have that you want to sack in this deck?
That's fair.
Yeah, you don't have that many.
Yeah.
So, but the turbo deck, like, people are doing a lot of work on it because they really like the idea of an Aya deck that can win turn 2. My understanding is what people have done is like if people don't interact with you, this deck can threaten turn 2, turn 3 wins really easily. You're just like playing fast mana and Dockside and Spirit Guides, and you're counting to 7 or 8, and you're winning. Some people are doing Secret Commander Godo, just Naya
just
Godo,
14 mana.
Because why
Godo.
not? Yeah, just 14 mana Godo. There's people doing stuff with like Panharmonicon because now you get 2 triggers, which means you can get both sides of a Kiki combo, for example, off of it. There's just a lot of directions because there's so many combos because it's a tutor in the command zone.
Yeah.
Just today, I started testing a build I was goldfishing with. You run, and this is some crazy ass shit. My favorite combo. So there was a time in the Heliod history where we started playing Knowledge Pool Rule of Law.
I remember this.
We stopped playing it because people realized that if they just cast Nagila or Crom or the 5 CMC white guy, Kenrith, they beat the Heliod deck. Because it turns out if Heliod's not a creature, we just die.
LeVine had the same problem. That's why we got it from that deck.
Yeah. But you know what card is actually really good in this deck? Possibility Storm. Why is Possibility Storm good in this deck? Because it's a Rule of Law deck, so this lock works. And the thing that we can cast in our command zone can just tutor anything. And if we get, for example, Wirewood Symbiote, now we can cast it from our hand. Let Possibility Storm put a creature in play. Oh, it's going back to the command zone. I'm going to tutor again. I'm going to bounce it with Symbiote. And so now, like, under even not a lock situation, we just incur an incredible amount of value because it really just doesn't affect us. And eventually we get to the lock, or you can food chain through it. You cast enchantments into it until you get your food chain. Then you use Rocco to get your Squee. Squee gets cast from exile. So you can loop it through food chain and then do your Rocco thing. So you can literally food chain through a Possibility Storm. That's amazing. Like, I'm so pumped to get to play a Possibility Storm deck. This is going to be great.
That's also a food chain deck. And
it's also a food chain deck, also a Rule of Law deck, and also a toolbox deck. Also just a Kiki Jiki combo deck, because those decks are so nice to play when you're a stacks deck, because it's just a creature-based combo. Like, you don't have to worry about your null rods, right? This is Blood Pod without having to worry about the pod thing. Like, originally I was like, oh, I got to include Birthing Pod. Then I was like, I actually don't. Like, I don't need all this extraneous win condition stuff. I just have a tutor in my command zone, so I can pivot really easily. If you have to, you know what? You're a deck with a lot of elves. Allosaurus Shepherd is a fine win condition for this deck. You have, like, weird combos you can do with Terror of the Peaks, where you just loop Rocco to kill everyone. And, like, guess what else is good? Terror of the Peaks just kills all the creatures on the board as you play more of your creatures, and then you win with combat. Like, the deck can pivot so well. So it's all the things I wanted my Heliod and Lincivi decks to do. It's, like, kind of what I want Armix Tymna to do. You know, it's not necessarily as good as Winota. It is kind of the same thing where you're basically stacking out the board and snowballing with value with Rocco, or just getting to a Kiki combo. So they feel very similar in that regard.
I feel like this is almost more compelling as a Turbo Secret Commander Winota deck than a Turbo Secret Commander Rector.
People have literally talked about that too, because it turns out that your elves aren't humans.
Yeah, like, but that's like my thought, right? Is I just like looking at this card and like thinking through like the turbo lines of it. I'm like, I feel like it's way easier to set up like a turbo, like Winota.
The problem is
into play with like a bunch of stuff.
Turbo Winota doesn't like have the payoff of win the game right away. Winota snowballs over turns. Mm-hmm. So like counting to 7 so that you can get to Winota probably means your dorks are tapped. So that's a little bit of a tension. And
just be patient, guys.
Just be patient.
Just be patient.
But I don't know. This is, I think, the best commander in the set. Like, this is like, we have a new top stacks commander. I said very controversially that Winota was the best stacks commander. You announced it in one of the MLC videos.
I did.
If this deck existed in the draft, I would have taken it before Winota. I think that this deck is better than Winota. Mm-hmm. And I don't know that my current build of Hate Bears with Food Chain and Possibility Storm is like the best build, but like this.
I mean, it just came out. There's plenty of like. It took Winota a little while to really like break through and like figure itself out. And again, like I said, it's gotta spend a year in college, man. It's gotta get a little bit of growth in the system.
We already have 120 people in the Discord, so there's like a lot of active argument. I just had to time out my first, user today because people are getting a little heated about what direction is the best direction. But I have now purchased all the cards for the deck because this deck is my new main deck, which is sad because I now have all of Winota and Tymna Armix, and like I can't imagine what day I'm gonna wake up and be like, I want to play that over this deck. But maybe it's because I want to reanimate Razzacat, maybe. Well, only
or you
want
to draw cards off of Tymna.
Yeah,
and destroy stuff with Armix.
Yeah,
there's lots of stuff, man.
But Rocco can tutor for removal because creatures have removal attached to them.
I think Michael has a big rock. I think Michael has is a little rock hard for Rocco.
It's not inaccurate, to be honest. It's not inaccurate. This card's so good. So
well, we've spent 2.5 hours talking about what is this? 17 cards?
Yep,
something like that. Which is pretty on par for us. Do you guys want to go get an 18 in? Get a tight 18 in now? Make it an even number, or you want to stop on 17?
We can talk about the Lavinia
The people at home are like, give us one more, please.
All right, so for our encore, our last card will be the obligatory Lavinia card, in which, believe it or not, we haven't really talked about a whole lot recently because I have not been very like actively playing Lavinia for a while. And
I feel like you still managed to mention Lavinia more times than I mentioned Nixilis tonight, though.
Yeah, it's true.
But you also forget how many times I've mentioned Arden.
Oh, that's forget about that. Forget about that.
This is Scheming Fence. It costs a white blue. It's a human citizen, which I think is a bizarre like creature type. It sounds like such an alien like creature line. Like, I am a human citizen. It is a 2/3. As Scheming Fence enters the battlefield, you may choose a non-land permanent. Activated abilities of the chosen permanent cannot be activated. Scheming Fence has all activated, abilities of the chosen permanent, except for loyalty abilities. You may spend mana as though it were mana of any color to activate those abilities. Now, it is very interesting here to point out. There was a little bit of misunderstanding on how the card works, because I did see quite a few people, including Cobblepot, on Twitter discussing this card about how when whatever the chosen card goes away, it loses the activated ability part. It does not. It remembers that card, the way layers work and everything. It's not
like linked to the card.
Exactly. It's not linked to the card. But that's also the downside of it, because you can't play this proactively to like pithing needle something, right? The card has to already be out.
I mean,
what'd you say?
You can't name a card, but that's like for very obvious reasons, because otherwise like it would be strictly incorrect to like not just name Necropotence every time.
Yeah, and just gain its
just like 2 mana, white blue Necropotence. Like, let's go. Like forget Grizzlebrand. Like
right. So there is that part of it. But I think it's very important to like, this is a good card. We've some of the like interesting things that I don't think people have, like, I think Michael has pointed this out of how in Vintage you can do what is it? You time vault through a null rod. Well, like you can do time vault wins while your own null rod is out, because it isn't an artifact. Funnily enough.
And there's usually these play patterns in vault key decks where you're okay with putting your vault on the board, so that you're more mana efficient when the turn you're going to go off, because you can protect it with Force of Will, whatever. This is wild because it just turns off your opponent's time vault if they put it out in advance, and now you have a time vault. Luckily, it's summoning sick. Like, this is not going to break Vintage, in my opinion, because you can. It's not like you put your time vault out, then you put this out and you win immediately. You actually need to put your time vault out, put this out, steal a vault's abilities, and then pass the turn, and then get to your turn. Right. But it's going to be played in Vintage. If this is the card that gets time vault, I mean, the thing is, they're not going to ban it. It's not going to be like worse level fucked up shit. So I maybe they will restrict this card if this is a problem. But it's cool.
Mildly interesting is you could play this and choose like your own Grim Monolith, and this will untap every turn.
Yeah, because it only has
the activated abilities.
Yeah.
So you could legitimately play this, and then like this seems okay as a card on its own, because it has a lot of things that it can do.
I mean, like at minimum, it's kind of like arguably like a better thieving skydiver, right? Like,
yeah,
because it's just 2 mana and you essentially steal their rock.
Yeah.
It's
like honestly exactly the type of card Lavinia wants, because it's reactive. It deals with things on the board, stuff like Kenrith. You're just like, okay, Kenrith, you can't just pump your team and then go over top of me. I can the Kenrith now. I am the Kenrith now. I am the returned king. But
it can turn off an Agila, and you have an Agila, even though you probably won't have.
You don't get the triggered ability.
You don't get the triggered ability, but you can turn off an Agila, which is like it's not irrelevant.
And you can untap your warriors, whatever warriors.
Whenever you have warriors, blue white warriors.
Well, you can attack. You can untap your attacking creature, all your attacking creatures.
All your attacking. It's true.
For all that, all of that rainbow mana that Lavinia is able to make, really.
You can spend mana as though it were mana of any color.
Oh, that's true.
Oh, true.
Okay,
interesting.
Okay, never mind.
You got a pseudo Nagila now. You're gonna win those combats.
That's actually wild. But
so I think this is a cool card. I think that it'll see play because it's gonna turn off someone's Soul Ring, and then you're gonna have a Soul Ring.
Yeah,
and that's like the minimum. In late game, it's gonna do something more impressive.
It not being a proactive piece, I do understand.
I can't wait for someone to pass a turn with the Necropotence in play, and then this comes out, because they still can't draw cards, but now they don't have a Necropotence, and you can
draw cards.
Yep.
Yeah, and you can draw cards. So
on your
there's going to be really, really cool things that you can do with it. So I think there'll be blue-white decks that will play it. I don't know if like this kind of like Timna Malcolm shell will play that kind of card, but it just feels really strong.
Yeah.
So I imagine.
I love you, Cobblepot, but your assessment of the card was incorrect.
I mean, I agree that it's a lot less good than people think it is, but not it's more because the things have to be on the board, and like usually if a necropotence is on the board, things are bad for you already, right? And so I don't think it's like broken. I think that blue-white and maybe blue-white and one other color decks will play it.
Blue-white and ban.
I don't think Nixilis is going to play it.
Right.
You know, that's not going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, it could end up
this getting played in like.
It could end up being surprisingly good, though, right? Like I'm like willing to change my mind on this card if it just turns out that like we are misevaluating it like crazy because like it is consistently just coming down as a soul ring and shutting off someone's soul ring, or being better late game.
Yeah, but Thieving Skydiver is like not that good, right? That's
but Thieving Skydiver's ceiling is not as high as this card.
Yeah, and that's kind of. That's kind of the one thing I do. We were talking about this, I think, a little bit earlier, is it's like the floor of this card is like at worst a mana Crypt or Mox Diamond, which it's like, okay, it's a little overcosted, but I mean, it's like on rate with like an Arcane Signet, right? Its ceiling is insane.
Well, so I think what remains to be seen with this card is how consistently you can hit that floor. And I think that it's hard to evaluate without actually playing the card and seeing how consistent it is and realizing that floor. But I don't know, I kind of feel like you're going to hit the floor pretty often with this card, at least personally.
I do think so.
Yeah.
And so I think it's decent.
So, and that's why I think it's not as good as, but I think that the floor is.
You think the floor is not good enough for a card? It's not
as good as people think. In 3-color decks, I think.
In 3,
because like an extra Arcane Signet is something you'd want, but remember, this is basically like a come into play tap Arcane Signet. Right, you're not going to tap it for mana right away, which is a big difference. So there's reasons why the floor isn't quite that good, but I think that it for the 3-color decks, like Tulane's going to play this, obviously.
You can reset it with Cullen,
yeah, exactly. So like there's a lot of reasons Derevi.
I think Derevi, could play this for sure.
Yeah, you can. It becomes a soul ring, and now you can untap it a bunch of times with Derevi, right? Like
it can become an outlet if you're doing Emil stuff, and somebody has like a Thrasios in play. You can just flicker it with Emil. I mean, depending on what's in play.
So I think those 3-color, especially banned decks, will be interested in it. But if it isn't something like that, where you can turn it into an outlet or something, it's just like a good value card, and I don't know, it's good enough. But yeah, Chulane and Derevi, gross. Definitely in those decks.
Yeah, it's super exciting. I might play this in Arden Crom. Maybe. Again, like I said, I have a hard time like evaluating creatures in that deck because it's just one of those things where it's like your creature has to be very impactful for you to be willing to spend a spell slot on it, because it is a rule of law control list. So it's like, unless your sorcery speed spell is, doing something like Anchor to Reality, where you're like slamming in a giant equipment, or a vehicle, which that deck doesn't play, but like Katari does. That's a deck I'm working on. Like, to play at like that pace, I think it needs to be. I don't know if this is quite impactful enough to be worth the like spell slot under a rule of law.
Is it gonna feel good when you choose Necro?
It is gonna feel like sex when you hit somebody's Necropotence with it. It's gonna be so sweet. But the other thing that's important to note with it is because it's a choose, it's not a target, so it can get around Hexproof and Shroud and Ward and all that silly stuff, which I think is very important to note. But we've been going at this for 2 hours and 40 minutes, and I think I was being naive as I am going into this, and I was like, we're gonna keep this at a tight 2 hours.
We're gonna hammer this one out.
6 minutes. Yeah, 6 minutes per card did not work out like.
And then
I was going to.
I forgot who we are.
We went off the rails talking about Modern. It happens.
We also cut half the cards we were going to talk about before we started.
We actually did. We cut so many cards. But hopefully you enjoyed what we did talk about. We're going to be back next week. talking about Commander 22, which has been fully spoiled as of recording. But we'll be back next week to give our full rundown on that card. Any final thoughts from you guys, Michael, before we head off?
Rocco, just come to the Discord. Come
Rocco's
through.
Modern Life.
It is a wild card. It is a wild deck. Like any kind of deck you want to play, you can basically do it as long as you can fit it in Naya.
Yeah.
So very sweet. Come brew.
Yeah. Pongo, anything you want to say before we head out?
I mean, I think that overall this is a pretty solid set. Kind of continuing with Wizards' sort of, I would say, pace of introducing new cards into the format. We're getting, I would say, one or two kind of like slam dunk type cards, and then, cards that are archetype empowering or, create their own kind of deck. And so I think that this is a very reasonable pace to be getting new cards entering into the format to keep things fresh. So, I applaud them on that front. I'm hoping that, the upcoming Commander Baldur's Gate set will be a little bit more juiced, and that'll be, hopefully, we'll have a lot to talk about then.
Hey, Watsy, if you haven't made this decision yet, could you please reprint Jeweled Lotus in this set? That's all I'm
and Dockside.
Or Dockside. That's fine too.
Both.
Either one, preferably both. But in case you haven't thrown it, listen, your draft environment's going to be fine if you include these cards, okay? Just do it. Help out us people who want to afford these goddamn cards. Because it turns out that once you do that, we're going to pay more money to you to get the card. So please reprint that card. Those cards.
And then ban Dockside.
If you don't tell Sheldon to ban, if like you don't actively sit here and tell Sheldon and crew, please ban Dockside, and they go, fine, then don't reprint it, please. But if they don't want to ban it, then reprint that puppy into the ground, man. Make them regret not banning that card. But anyway, that about wraps things up for us here today. Thank you so much for joining us here on the Mind Sculptors. Just a quick reminder, we did talk about this at the top of the show, but if you want to support us over on Patreon, you can go head over there at patreon.com/the Mind Sculptors. Want to give a special shout out to a few of our high tier patrons. Justin, there's this guy named Michael LeVine who's one of our patrons. It must be a coincidence. It can't be the same person.
Yeah, coincidence.
CZ, David Snavely, Dionysius, Jason Bialik, Matt Boehner, and Senior Coupon. Thank you all for supporting the channel and your contributions. Those are some of our higher tier patrons. We really appreciate what you do. It really helps us do things like the MLC and keep doing this show at the quality that we're able to do it at. If you want to keep up on things, including the MLC, head on over to @MLC_league, or you can go to www.mlcedh.com. We have a website. So you can head over there. There will be rankings. I'm working on getting all of the player profiles put on there, getting a fully functional website, but it will have more information, and it will have some places to go, and we'll have like the full schedule once I get it all onto there. But the place does exist for you, so you can head over there. MLCEDH.com is where you can get all your MLC league news. With that, thank you for joining us so much. And from all of us here at the Mind Sculptors, I'm Callahan, and we'll see you next time.
I'm in line with the stars, I'm in sync with the earth. 10 toes deep, flower child from the turf. I never switch sides, like even when I die, I'ma ride for the squad, light up tires in a hearse. I've been on a vibe, kinda hard to describe. I'm in between, I'm good and it's fine, but I'm tired of the grind. Then I come alive in the night to realize I'm in the middle of the time of my life. I never so packed for the stack, never lied on the rap. Got a bag from the way that I write it. Queen looking it, but it don't make sense. Cause you can lose life on this fast route. Yeah, turn thoughts to a cash cow. I might flip that to the glass house. I don't need the accolades, I'm in love with the chase. I just wanna eat, save a spot at the table. Beast with the slap, pin myself on the map. You long with the wind, but we knowing that it's cap. 5-hour flights, couple nights at the flat. To be real, couldn't see me making moves while I'm at. I'm still on the grind, limit time when I chat. Burning down sage, keep the demons away. When I write it, give a piece of myself to the page. I don't do it for the praise, love, that's just how I'm made.
Truth in the glass in the mirror.
Yeah.
Do it at me, old man, tryna pass in the fear. You're the first one to talk, but the last one to hear. Eyes blurry, but I couldn't see the